to tonight's study session of the Boulder City Council. I am Taisha, or Council Member Taisha Adams, and thank you for joining us. We have two items on tonight's agenda. First, we will hear information on the Civic Area Concept Plan and Phase 2 scope. Our second item is the 2026 Policy Statement on Regional, State, and Federal Issues to review and discuss. Before we go into our work item, I would like to outline how the meeting will be conducted. We will review the staff's presentations, and then we will have time for questions. At the end of the presentation, we will conduct our council discussion with staff. If you have questions, please wait for staff to complete their presentation. We will now turn to our city manager, Nuria Rivera Vandermeer, to introduce our first item. Nuria.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Adams, and good to see everybody. Our first item for tonight is an item that so many people in community have been excited about, have weighed in on. There has been a lot of engagement, and so I will send it right over to our lovely Director of Parks and Recreation, Allie Rhodes, who we cannot see her camera. I don't know if she
I'm working on it.
I figured you might be.
I'll just be a voice in the background right now, but that's okay because this is brief and I'll figure out my video when we have time. But folks, I'm Allie Rhodes. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation, and I am so honored to be here with you tonight to talk about the Civic area. I have lived in this town just a year shy of 30 years, and one of the things I love about Boulder is that we are always trying to be great. And I know that it was in a desire to be great that City Council approved this project in the next tranche of funding when voters approved it with 70% approval in 2021, the next round of the Community Culture, Resilience, and Safety Tax. And so we're eager to dig in tonight and show you a concept plan that addresses some of the most dated infrastructure in our community, that creates an amazing connection between the Hill and downtown and the economic activity that is happening on both, connects our community to each other and to nature. And so we want to remind you on this process slide here that this is a project 10 years in the making. In 2015, we finalized a civic area plan, and we said when that plan was approved that we would steadily march towards the vision that it outlined. And so there's the Civic Area Park Plan. Phase 1 development happened in 2018, and we kicked this project off 2 years ago. We did significant analysis. We have done a whole lot of community engagement, and we're here at the Pink today, where we're marching forward in two directions. One is related to the redevelopment of the East Bookend, and we talked to you all about that in April. And really, we're at the phase where we're drawing the boundary for where we'll make the next investment in the civic area. And so tonight, our team is going to share with you the concept for the whole park, because we do want it to feel like one cohesive, amazing public space. And you're going to see the recommendations for the $18 million investment. And those will be continued to be reviewed as we develop the park management plan and total cost of operations. So to share more about the park concept plan, I'm going to hand you to Mark Davison, our senior planning manager. He's representing an incredible team of landscape architects led by our project manager, Shihomi Kuriyagawa, who you all have met. We're sad she's not here, but super happy she's enjoying the bottom of the Grand Canyon. We're also joined by a national design firm with a local office here in Boulder, represented by Principal Nate Cormier. So, Mark.
Thank you, Allie. Mark Davison, Park Planning Manager. I'm going to walk you through the presentation tonight with Nate Cormier, who is the principal of our consultant firm, Rios. I'll take you through the initial questions, just to have those in the background in your mind, the project background, and then Nate and I will work on the key drivers. He'll take you through the concept plan, and then I'll pick back up the recommendations and next steps before we have the facilitated discussion. So, what are the questions for Council tonight? First one is, does Council have feedback on the concept plan for the civic area? And that is the concept plan for the whole study area. Secondly, does Council have feedback on the elements advancing into construction in phase 2 for the civic area? That is the $18 million that have been allotted for the project. So let's just do a brief project background. I know a lot of us are familiar with this, but it is good just to put a pointer on where the project is and what the study area is. So you see there the Civic area being the heart of the downtown and basically south of Pearl Street. And then if you look under the hill and the CU along with the conference development, that is an important connection to the Civic area. And you'll see that green arrow from conference development, the Civic area being the Arboretum path, which is a critical connector that is part of this project. The other thing I want to point out, which Ali touched upon, is the Civic area itself. Not only is it a major place for the community to gather, it kind of highlights Boulder's natural beauty in terms of the amazing Boulder Creek and the iconic Flatirons, where you've got beautiful views of those from most of the areas in the site. What you see in this slide is focusing in, kind of zooming in on the Civic area itself. And I'll just work through the different projects that are going on so you get a sense of it. In 2018 in blue, you'll see that that was phase 1, where we basically did a multi-use space, a bit of creek restoration, and developed the playground next to the library. Today, we're going to do a little reveal. What you see in pink is what we're recommending as staff for the implementation of phase 2. That is the work that will go forward for construction. And you see that mostly in Central Park and 13th Street, and then some circles around the park. These are gateways, signage, wayfinding that will help unite the civic area as a whole. And then the yellow on the far right-hand side is the public-private partnership for the East Book End. All of these we'll touch on in more detail in the presentation. And here's where we're at in terms of the project schedule. We're getting towards the end of the year tonight, and as part of the engagement process, we've been asking for prioritization of what goes forward in phase 2. In 2026, we will move into design development and construction drawings for the amount allotted for the project. And then finally, we'll move into construction in 2027. Part of moving into construction in 27 will be probably in February is our hope. And obviously, we will make sure we don't impact the inaugural Sundance Film Festival. Okay, what are the key drivers for this concept plan that has emerged over the last few months with the major community engagement for Window 3? I think we're all familiar with this, but it is the 3 inputs into the design. We have the community engagement, we have the policy guidance, we have the technical site analysis. Something that overlays this, which Council actually brought up to us in 2 years ago when we started the project, was to make sure we engage with this framework, sustainability, equity, resilience, and that is running through the project and has been fed into the design. So in terms of the policy, as this is a major area in the heart of downtown, there obviously is quite a bit of policy that runs through this. I'm not obviously going to read every single plan in there, but the 2015 Civic Area Plan has probably been our major guidance, along with obviously taking into account all the other policies that apply to the civic area. In that 2015 Park Plan, there were 7 guiding principles. And they are what has really driven the design of the space and how we think about the space activation. What is interesting about the 7 principles is both Council as yourselves in 2014 affirmed these principles. And we went out in, let's see, window 1 for engagement. The community itself also affirmed these. And with that, we made the commitment to weave equity through each of these principles to ensure that exists. And that really wasn't the focus of the 2015 plan, but it's something that has emerged later. So we've ensured that is part of how we think about the principles. So here is where the engagement has actually occurred. There's been 3 windows. In window 1, we asked for the big ideas. What do people think of this space? What could this space be? It was kind of a brainstorming on how the civic area could become the heart of the downtown and really support community identity, community activation, community enjoyment of this space. In window 2, we really started to narrow in, working with the community to say, okay, of all these ideas, which ones are important? And that wasn't prioritizing at that one point. It was just to get a sense of what's important. What do you want to see advanced into a concept plan? And that's where we are today. So in window 3, over the last few months, we've worked with the community and said, hey, we've got the $18 million. It probably covers about 20% of the site. Of all of these great things in the concept plan, which other things do we really need to bring forward? And that's what you'll see in the staff recommendation tonight. As we did the engagement, there was obviously an equity focus. It is As part and parcel now of our work, we include the racial equity instrument. We work with historically excluded groups, 2 community connectors, the community connectors in residence, and key city community-based organizations to get their input. We also worked with youth and older adults. And part of that was thinking about the multi-generational feedback. An example of that was 2 months ago, we had a roll and stroll event for people experiencing disability, families with children experiencing disability, and older adults. And we did a walk around the Civic area to get feedback on how we can think about universal design as just one example of that work. At this point, I'll pass you over to Nate from Rios to take you through the concept plan analysis and the concept plan itself.
All right, thank you, Mark. And what an honor to be here with all of the council members this evening. I'm Nate with Rios. Before we dive into the concept plan, just a few of the 10,000-foot level discoveries that the team made as we spent time on site and engaging with city stakeholders and with the community. The first was really the need to overcome barriers, whether that's views into the civic area, physical barriers to circulation, disconnections. How are we healing and weaving elements of the civic area back together? The second was big lesson learned was there's such a broad range of experiences in the civic area, roughly organized around the idea that more upstream to the west is more natural. It ties into your larger natural systems. This morning, my team here in town took me out for some ice bathing in the creek, just to the west. And then at the other end of the extreme, you've got BMocha and Pearl Street and downtown and all this vibrant urban energy. And so this nature culture gradient and making sure we're allowing for all those experiences here in the civic area is critical. And that plays into this idea that the creek itself has different personalities, different opportunities that are available along the creek. And we want to weave together the rest of surrounding downtown, pull that into the civic area at the same time that we're taking those elements of creek ecology and bringing them out into the city as well. So what are the gateways? What are the what we call funky moments, elements of history and art and culture that animate the space that all need to be addressed and woven together? Next slide, please. So that ultimately it really is about unifying the civic heart of Boulder, that you know when you've arrived, you know that there's diversity, many voices, many different experiences on offer anytime you visit the civic area, but also that they cohere, they really come together, that they build on the investments you've made in phase one. Those should feel harmonious and a part of everything else you see us adding over time, but really it becomes something that everybody, it's very recognizable and very easy to access and move through and feel safe and welcome and invited to the civic area. Next. So now we get to reveal and discuss the design itself. This is the overall concept for the civic area. And you can see, of course, there's the main footprint of the civic area, as well as we've always been including this critical connection up the hill to the university with the Arboretum path. We're going to take you on a tour. We'll start at that west end, the more natural end of the gradient. We'll move through the social space we call Boulder Beach, which is complementing phase one with improvements on the south side of the creek. We'll take a look at that connection up to CU, and then we'll come back and end in the east end, which is also the area, as Mark described, is it's our recommendation based on all of the community feedback as to the place to take that next step with phase two of detailed implementation. So this is just a map of those zones before we dive in. So starting at the west end, again, this is a place more about nature discovery, immersion. There are overflow channels, more meandering. The nature, the personality of the creek is less channelized here, has more opportunities for ecology and exploration. I've got a perspective view of what that might be like. Next. Oops, oh, maybe we lost that view. Sorry. And we'll take the next chapter is the Boulder Beach. So this one is really emphasizing the social life of the civic area in ways that you use the phase one park today, but expanding. You can see roughly the footprint of the lawn in front of the stage at phase one, really expanding that to 2 or 3 times that size on the south side by replacing the parking lot with a much more generous shared picnicking area. taking the edge of the creek itself and making these accessible shallows, so eddies and places where all users can get down and interact with the creek. And then we have an iconic opportunity for what we call the Nature Hub. This is a place for education, camps, restrooms, potentially some concessions, food and beverage that support all of that enhanced social life along the creek. And of course, great views to the mountains from there. And next, we'll look at the Arboretum path. So this is taking what is now from Broadway down to the creek. There's a shared use path, but if you've ever walked there, it can get pretty busy. And so peeling those two users apart. So we'll have one path that's for the bicycles and e-bikes and those things, and then another path for the pedestrians, and then continuing the pedestrian corridor up all the way to CU. So connecting to the conference center and creating, really taking what the inspiration of this arboretum and elevating the ecology there, giving dramatic views of the mountains and overlooking the ball fields, while at the same time creating safe, separate mobility for the bike path and the pedestrians. Next, I think we have the East End. Okay, so really excited to look at ways that in partnership with a potential public-private development on the other side of 13th, turning 13th, which is currently where you have your farmers market and other activities, into a festival street. So this could be a curbless zone that continues to be a marketplace, but also so much more, so many other ways to occupy and make that part of a whole porch that overlooks an expanded flexible green. So where right now the ditch divides spaces that sometimes feel a little bit like leftovers, by unifying those, you take this dramatic icon of the historic bandshell and make that the backdrop for a great big festival grounds that you could imagine all kinds of community gatherings and activities taking place here. Next, we have this is a view of 13th as a festival street. On a day-to-day basis, there'll be some sort of shade canopies, creating more seasonal comfort. To the right, you're seeing that porch area, some decks in amongst the large mature trees, so they're shaded and comfortable. You could imagine, getting your food or your drink from the farmer's market, or from perhaps with the redevelopment of the East Bookend, a market hall, and bringing that out to enjoy in the shade of the trees, and with this dramatic view of the Flatirons in the distance. And then this is, during market activation, how that space is really flexible and usable as continues to be a critical home for the farmer's market. And other, could be used for lots of other activities as well. So back to you, Mark, with another layer of the activation.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. Great description of the concept plans. And what you're seeing here is what emerged from cultural landscape work and then storytelling and discussing the history of the site was, how do we provide an art, history, and cultural story walk? So you see here that this is overlaid over the complete concept plan all the way up through the Arboretum. It'll be dynamic storytelling, trying to reveal the various layers of history, both good and bad, and positive and negative, but how it all weaves together into the story of Boulder and those who've come before us. So I'll just move to the final section now, which is the recommendations for phase 2. Nate's covered them in detail, so I'll just be providing the overview of where the recommendations are aligned and how the community prioritized those decisions for the recommendation tonight. What you see here is the various types of folks we reached out to for engagement window 3. We did, pop-up events, in-person events, etc. And we simply said to the community, please help us prioritize what is important to move forward based upon the current funding for phase 2 of the project. And in it, you see on this bar chart now, the top 5: Boulder Beach, the farmers market, providing a year-round market hall, nature play. And what's seen there as a nature hub is a place where there's park amenities, critical things like restrooms, concessions for recreation, and a focus on youth activities. With that information, we were able to lay that out spatially. And now what you see is those priorities laid out across the concept plan for the site. Boulder Beach, yes, had emphasis, but that frankly could be not within the current costing, and some complications with floodplain analysis, and the fact that the Central Park and 13th Street area had the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th most popular items, led us to concentrate in that area. And here you see what we're recommending, which, you know, I did the reveal in that early slide. You see the basically 13th Street is a festival street. This ribbon, almost promenade moving out that incorporates nature play, water play, a place for people to gather for food and beverages. And then you see how the band shell and the seating can be updated and improved, making it more accessible, more activated. And then just the little circles around the site are examples of where we want to do gateways, wayfinding, and weave in aspects of that storytelling I touched on earlier. Obviously, that's where the major funding will go for the physical development of the site. Something we heard from the community was, hey, can you do a little bit more with the space activation as well? And this is the idea that parts of that Boulder Beach area, the Arboretum path, could be activated through pop-ups or small maintenance needs that come up. Part of this has come through the success of the Wildwoods nature play area, which is next to the farmers market on Central Park. I think most of you might have seen it now. That's a pop-up that will last for about 12 months. Has been a great way to activate the space, make it more welcoming, increase safety. And then the final thing I'll mention is in sense of that sort of unifying the civic area, what would that look like? Well, in 26, we'll be doing a park renaming exercise, and that'll be part of the window for engagement, in this case with a special focus on youth, helping us to think about the renaming of the civic area, similar to what we saw for Primos Park up north. And then here, the final slide is a really important slide. In the top left quadrant, you see the design work we're doing. We know we don't want to get to ribbon cutting and just basically open up the park to everything. Instead, we'll be doing a park management plan, which also looks at 3 other key aspects of park management. Taking care of what we have. What are the operations? What's the total cost of management? What are staff roles and responsibilities to keep this maintained? In terms of space activation, I've touched on things like pop-ups, but it'll be like what are volunteer activity, youth programming, educational programming, and recreation services. And then finally, how do we think about social behaviors, creating a socially progressive space that also is basically, you know, in terms of for the community, feeling like a safe place. And so I'll just touch on next steps. Q1 26, we'll be moving into design development. And in parallel to that, we'll be doing the park renaming and branding effort. In the fall of 26, we'll be doing the final design share out, where the implementation of phase 2 in terms of those construction drawings and the final design will emerge that will allow us to begin construction in early 2027. And with that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Adams to lead us and facilitate us through the questions for councils and any other discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark. This is so exciting and really looks incredible. I look forward to our council discussion. Council members, we have 2 questions. Does the council have feedback on the concept plan is the first, and the second is the actual elements advancing the construction on specific to phase 2. So we're going to start. We have 70 minutes total, and we're gonna start with the first question on feedback on the general concept plan. Ryan, would you like to kick us off? And
Well,
then
thank you. Just kind of a point of order. Can we do questions to staff before we address their questions?
maybe that can be a part of your feedback.
Okay, great. I don't need to go first. I just wanted to ask about that.
Okay. Tina?
Hi, thank you for going through the plan. So I am going to start with a question also. How do we envision some of the activation when the weather isn't as good? So we have different climates here, and we have windy days and rain and extreme heat and cold. Do we have some areas where we can be a little bit more nimble in not as good weather?
No, I appreciate that question. It's come up quite a bit as we think about it. We actually held an engagement event in the spring where we nearly all got blown away, so we totally understand that. The 13th Street Festival Street, that will have canopy structures to provide for all year round use, and obviously to protect from elements of the weather, both in terms of sun and rain. And then there'll be smaller areas around the site that are basically like shade structures that provide for that little bit of sort of semi-enclosure. It's not permanent enclosure. And then as we start to think about how do we move people around the site as a whole, we'll also be looking for those small interventions gateways where people can take some shelter. So there won't be like full enclosure of the site, as it were, but we are looking for those opportunities from both sun and rain, and frankly, looking at windbreaks as well that can support that.
Okay, and then with the year-round farmers market, what is the structure in terms of who, will the farmers market eventually own the space, or will that always be owned with the farmers market as a tenant? Like, or what is that structure look like?
No, I appreciate that. I can speak to the structure, but first off, perhaps I can ask Director Rhodes to respond on like ownership and how we'll work in partnership with the farmers market.
Yeah, I'll just share that.
I forgot, I'm not supposed to unmute. We're sharing a speaker. That's on me. I'm a tech guru tonight. So the relationship with the farmers market right now is that we're close partners. Mackenzie and her team have been actively involved throughout the project, and we're not anticipating any changes in ownership or management. However, we do intend to deepen the partnership, and there's a lot more work to happen before that, that last graphic Mark showed with the park management plan. We're eager to talk to all of the anchor partners, including the library district and others, about year-round activation. And so that's some of the work ahead of the next 2 years, is really to flesh out what all those relationships look like.
And then, yeah, in terms of the structure, in all honesty, as we move to design development, we'll be delving into the exact details of that. What we've heard at the moment from folks, not just from the farmers market, but for a year-round event, Festival Street, is there needs to be some enclosure, but not total enclosure. So it might be a series of canopies.
Okay, and then I'll just provide my feedback, if that's okay,
course.
Councilmember Adams. So I really appreciate the focus on maintenance, and especially it's great to be adding restrooms. We've had issues with those in public spaces, so the fact that we're going to be working to finding that solution is great, and making sure that we have long-term maintenance and that it feels accessible to people, especially around the children's play area adjacent to the library, where I've probably heard the most feedback with less access there. The other piece is I love that we're having an art, culture, and history walk that's defined. I think it's great when you can come to a new place and be given a walk that's clear where you go, that's very well marked. I hate being like detailed like this, but I do think that we attract a lot of runners. So if at some point it could include mile markers and provide a 3-mile run and a 5-mile run, there seem to be a lot of enthusiasts for something like that. And then the last part is just when I think of the heart of Boulder, I think of it as the Civic area plus Pearl Street. So I'm glad that it's connected well with Pearl Street, but I do want to continue to think about, as we activate parts of the Civic area through more food and possibly retail, that it does create some kind of competition with Pearl Street. So how do we ensure that we're maintaining the economic vitality in both places and that we're not cannibalizing each other? So that would be my only thought that I have. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Matt?
Thanks, Tasha. So I want to pick up on the maintenance thing. I think that's something we've been hearing pretty loud and clear from community over the last year plus, is just maintenance. So it's good to see that there will be a maintenance plan with this, but I'm just wondering, how does this maintenance plan fit into a larger one? Because I think if we're going to do maintenance here, it makes sense that, while we're talking about fund our future, we're also funding our present, and that includes maintenance. So I like that we're touching here, but there's a lot of other infrastructure that needs a lot of love. And so I just want to make sure that this isn't the new thing that we take care of, but we also have the plan for maintaining and keeping up that standard with everything else. So I just want to make sure that we're going to do both and not just have the shiny object get the polish, because I think the community will want more than that. So that's something I hope to see. A question I have about connections to the hill. I see that in slide 34, and I'm curious as to better connectivity. I mean, so much of what we might do with a DDA and all of these things are creating these economic connections. could you maybe describe a little more about what that maybe looks like in terms of just better connectivity? That's been a trouble area. It's been an area that people have had some issues with safety. The bike chicanes, maybe not the best. So I'm just kind of wondering, what are we talking about here? Just some surface repaving or a really broad rethink of how we're connecting those areas?
No, Matt, I appreciate that. It's a great question, isn't it? Because it has been an area that's been neglected for a while, and it's sometimes hard to even envision what that could look like. We've spent a lot of time thinking about a number of things in terms of, first off, yes, it's some kind of commuter route, isn't it? Either for bikes, pedestrians, bike taxis to get people up and down the hill. And when we do that, we've looked at also the elevated aspect of this, and again, that ties into making sure it's also universally accessible. Then as you start to branch out from that, what are the opportunities in this area? And there seems to be two that have really emerged. One, let's think of the High Line. Obviously, we don't have the $100 million for the High Line, but there is ways to think about the way the High Line activated the space off to the sides, places to rest, places for people to gather, places for art to occur. And then as we start to think about more on the ground in the Arboretum, it is interesting. It's actually about 6 acres in total. Central Park's about 8 or 9 acres. It's not quite the same rectangular space that's easy to design in. But we've looked at opportunities where, thinking of that idea as an arboretum, is this a place where we can start to think about a future arboretum from a climate perspective? Can we start to grow things from our park operations team that would support Pearl Street and do that in-house, as it were? Can we, where we're already working with Boulder High School and New Vista High School on looking at food carts in the area and growing food with students and creating outdoor classrooms. And these, frankly, could be low-cost, high-impact sort of pop-ups I mentioned earlier. So the goal is thinking about food, thinking about climate, as well as the sort of commuter route and how do those spaces interact.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Next question kind of feeds on that, connecting route to things. And I see we have a lot of focus on the west side of 13. And we talk about new development on the east side in those buildings. What's the timing and synergy between these two things? Because I can see that there's one shared infrastructure, but also overlapping impacts. And so I just wanted to know, what's that timing on the east side of 13th in comparison to what you're envisioning for the west side and the park side?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Matt. You're talking about the public-private partnership on the East Book end. And what we have at the moment is I think we came to council last April to discuss that as a separate item to move that public-private partnership forward as thinking about the land use initially. And we're at the point where in December, we'll be able to do the RFI, the request for information, with developers to start to get their feedback. Once we get their feedback and the ideas, that will lead to a request, RFP, a request for projects. And that will hopefully, with those ideas coming in, there'll be a synergy between 13th Street, Central Park, and how we all work together. Because let's think about this, we're not looking to do construction till 2027. So that gives us a couple of years to work on how those spaces interact to make sure they're not separate or they're not duplicating services.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just general comments. I mean, I like how this has shaped, I think, the community involvement and the way the community is telling us what they want. I think that's great. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to show that we're listening and that community can shape the outcome of this stuff. And so I just look forward to having this done so that we get to prove that when community is a part of this process at the early stages, they get to see the fruits of that labor and see it come to life. So I appreciate the great work here, and I love a lot of aspects of what's happening, especially around farmers market. I mean, there's just we've been begging for something like that for so long. So to see that it's right in front of us is fantastic, along with some of the other activations. So I think this has so much synergy with everything else we're doing in terms of our cultural and economic department, our development department, and just all the things with parks and you name it. So really happy that this is continuing to move forward and excited to see this come together.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Mark.
Okay. First, it's a very exciting concept. I'd love to see it be realized, but my first question is about the money. I see we've got $18 million allocated for this phase of the development. Do we have a projection as to what the entire project in all phases will cost?
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I'll actually defer that to Nate Cormier from Rios. They've been putting together project costs and frankly, working nationally, have a better sense than ourselves in terms of what the typical cost is of a large downtown civic area. If Nate, if you're able to respond to that.
It's quite a wide range is the the starting point. We actually did go through an exercise with Ali and Mark where we benchmarked phase one work against national comparables. Everything from Clyde Warren Park in Dallas at $1,000 a square foot because it's covering a freeway to honestly, your phase one was one of the most efficient and we all apples to apples in terms of bringing them to a common comparison year, but some of the other recent projects that we've delivered, a Central Park for downtown Palm Springs was around $250 a square foot, a similar 2-acre urban park in downtown Houston, about $300 a square foot. So they can really be up there. You got your phase one in the ballpark of around $50 a square foot, which is these days would be a steal. And so I think, that gives you some sense of like, we're I would say, as we looked at the 18 million-ish that we're looking at for phase two, we're in the 100 and change. So less than a more urban park in a large city, but really with the type of amenities we're describing, structure over 13th and repaving. There's more hardscapes. It's more involved than what your phase one was. So we imagine something a little more intensive. It's more along that gradient we described. It's more at the urban end of the type of improvements that we're describing.
Well,
Mark, I'll just add, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, moving beyond per square foot prices, what does it look like in terms of total dollars?
Oh, so I'll jump in there, Mark. We've not paid for costing for the whole park because we know we don't have funding to develop the whole park. And so even developing the costing costs money. And so we paid for a concept plan for the whole park so that we could then narrow in on a project that is deliverable with the funding that's been allocated. And as we explore future phases, just like we do with all capital projects, we'll have to look at cost estimating at the time of funding, right? Because it's going to escalate between now and then. And so we don't have better answers than square foot because we've not paid for the costing.
Just as a just rule of thumb, looking at the plan, if you put your fingers over that east end that is the focus of this phase two and say that's in the 20 million range, you probably have 3-ish more bites like that if you were building it all now. But as Ali described, this is something that's going to happen over time. You make different decisions about whether there's a nature hub. There'll be more evolution in thinking as you learn things from each of the phases that you do. But it's in that order of magnitude if you were to try to bite off the whole remainder.
We have a lot of competition for our CCRS funds, so it'll be interesting to make those choices. Because my recollection of the 2026 budget is that we had the 18 million allocated for this, and then we had nothing for a couple of years, and then there was if my memory serves, which it often does not, there was another $6 million tranche of funds that were going to be available.
It was just the 18 million, Mark.
I'm sorry?
It was just the $18 million.
That's fine. My next question is, all of this is wonderful, but it's not going to have much meaning if we do not have effective public safety. This park has many more places to be and to recreate and sort of little nooks and crannies, and that raises issues with respect to how people are going to be safe in this environment. And do we have such a program? Have we begun to contemplate that? And what does that entail? Are we going to need more police?
I'm happy to hear. I'll start that conversation, Mark, in terms of a response, and then I'll throw it over to Ali or Mark Wolf or anyone else on the team to respond. The first thing which I mentioned as one of my last slides is when we've done previously, in my career anyway, when you've done design, you've got ribbon cutting, and then you're like, now how do we manage the space? It's not very effective, and it leads to unintended consequences, and frankly doesn't do the design justice. You'll see from the very beginning here, we've put a lot of effort into thinking through, as we do the design, what is space activation? Well, how do we manage the rules and regulations and the ranger patrols, police patrols, and how do we think of, frankly, the operations, not just from new stuff we're adding, but the existing stuff as well. And so we're putting that together over this course of the next year so that even a year before ribbon cutting, we've really thought through space activation, park operations. An example I could give is the pop-up Wildwoods Nature Play area. Since that's been in place over the last 6 months, and obviously it's not just the nature play area, it's working with our police department, the utilities department, our rangers, all teaming together. I heard this morning, and someone correct me if I've got the figure wrong, there's been a 50% reduction in incidents since the more activation and more management of that space. So we're even starting to see at this point, before the design's complete, that sense of doing this in tandem, in parallel, working together. So when we do get the design on the ground, it's not just a ribbon cutting. If people are like, great, this place belongs to me. This is a space I've known about. I've actually been in the engagement. I'm seeing what I asked for come to life. And now I can participate in the space. And Ali, please feel free to add some more detailed information to that if it's.
I know our teammates gave the figure. It's a 55% reduction in ranger contacts for rule violations this summer over last summer. And again, it's not just as a result of the nature play area that our team designed and built. I'm going to brag on them because it's super impressive. If you haven't seen the Wildwoods play area, I hope that you do. But really, we know that positive activity is one of the #1 drivers that creates more pro-social behaviors. And so, you know, between the Wildwoods area, the partnerships I mentioned earlier with the farmers market, the library district, activation. So the long story short to your question, Mark, is that we're already on it. And I think the data shows that this summer already, the Civic area, we've seen improvements. And really what I hope that we can address over the next couple of years are the perceptions of safety, that the Civic area is a safe place. Please come downtown, please come play in the Wildwoods and go to the farmers market, because it is a safe place for our community.
I intend to hang out at the beach. I just lost this as you were presenting. Are we doing something with the library parking lot?
Not in this phase. Not in this phase. The concentration of work is in Central Park and 13th Street. We will be looking at gateways, so there might be like a gateway or signage in that area, but we are not touching the parking lot.
My last question, with respect to the public-private partnership, what are we offering and what are we expecting in terms of responses?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that response, and folks can chip in. At this point, we're actually saying that's part of this RFI, the request for information. We're actually asking the developers to come to us with ideas. We're not trying to have a fixed point. You know, it's not a good stage to have a fixed point. As the ideas come in and the potential for collaboration emerges, that'll more be in the RFP when we put out the request for proposals, when we can sort of definitively say, here's how we want to work together, or here's how you can work together, you know, here's how you can do things on your own, or potentially here's how you might collaborate with nonprofits. So it'll be a few months more down the road before we're able to definitively say how we'd work together.
Okay, those are my questions, and thank you. It's a very interesting project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mayor Brockett. Thanks,
Taisha. Couple quick ones. So one is the band shell you're talking about, enhanced band shell or band shell enhancements. What specific kinds of things are you thinking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. We wish there was a few more dollars to enhance the band shell in terms of like a green room or audio. In truth, there isn't enough funding to do that. So instead, what we focused on, and what we went to the Historic Landmarks Board and have spoke with historic community members, not historic, but historic members of the community. And so we've really focused on the idea of how do we activate this space so it's enjoyable, so people can come and actually have a good time. It's difficult with the way the current seating arrangement is. It's a little bit difficult in front of the band shell to actually to dance based upon the surface. So what you see in the design is hardening the surface in front of the band shell. And then you see some grass terraces heading up the hill. These grass terraces will serve as seating. And then in fact, even the seating originally was green. It'll reflect that idea of being more natural. And it'll allow people, frankly, to use the space in a way that is also universally accessible. So it'll also increase the access to it. So it's more of a gentle intervention to increase, make the space more usable.
So replacing the existing benches with the grassy terraces?
Exactly.
How will we get splinters at concerts without the benches? I'm just sorry. And the next question, Actually, Mark asked my financial question, so thanks for that, Mark. So I'm excited about the connection ideas you've got going up towards the Arboretum and the different pathways and the boardwalk. That all looks fantastic. I know that's not in the funded phase 2 improvements. Do we have any sense when and how we might be able to get to that phase of improvements?
I'll respond to that and other folks can chime in, but it is one of the great examples where, we've been having a discussion with CU. Is there a partnership opportunity there to think about how we can activate this space? And then it does seem like a really great project that would be open to grant funding, especially with the new GoCo funding that has gone from like $1 million to up to $3 to $7 million. So there is grant funding, and then obviously partnerships are a sort of main avenue at the moment. And if anyone else has any other thoughts, please chime in.
And are those opportunities that we're going to be actively seeking in the sooner rather than later? I
think that yes, we did say we would advance as part of the project the sort of schematic design for the Arboretum, which then helps, if you've got the schematic design in place, it gives you a better opportunity to get the grant money or work with a partner. So that'll be something we'll be advancing over the next year.
That's great to hear. And then just my feedback is just thumbs up. I think you've got some fantastic ideas coming through in the Civic area overall, the concept plan. And I know you have added some additional things to like the phase 1 area. And so I don't know when we're going to get to them, but they look really positive. So, it'll be a lot of work over the years to find the funding and the resources, but I think the concept plan looks fantastic. So thanks for all the great work.
And Aaron, can I just clarify, when you mentioned the benches for the ban shell, I do want to be clear, would go to the landmarks board for anything related to changes in that landmark district.
Of course we would. Yes, not a guaranteed thing by any means.
Exactly, yeah.
Welcome, thank you. Tara.
Well, there's nothing like going fifth and everyone asks all your questions already. It's okay. But I'm going to segue off of Mayor Brockett's comments, and then I'll talk about everything else. So phase 4, does that mean it's fourth? Or does that not mean it's fourth? Because to me, it's one of the most, I guess maybe I'm excited that the community is so excited about the beach, and et cetera, and so am I, the farmer's market. But phase 4 to me is crucial for getting people from the hill to downtown. So is it fourth?
Sorry, I apologize. Our graphic maybe wasn't as clear as it could have been. The only phasing that's been discussed so far is phase 2. Those were just naming the large parts of the park, because we've done big presentations on boards at the park and stuff. And so it's been helpful to just as wayfinding, like when you see the one graphic, you know which station to go to. So it's simply named station 4, so you know where to go.
Good
but
thing.
It is it'll hopefully
All right,
have
let me
its
cross out this
champions.
whole speech. Hold on. No, I'm kidding. I didn't have a speech.
Kara, let me just say one thing on that, though, is that I think we share your sense of importance for that connection. And I think it's one of our key functions next year is to identify additional funding to begin those improvements, because it's such an important connection.
It is. I remember, I don't know if Councilmember Adams remembers, we were first discussing the Arboretum, and basically we said, what Arboretum? Finally, there are flowers there, but wouldn't it be awesome? We didn't say what Arboretum, but you can't really tell it's an Arboretum. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's exciting there are flowers there, but I was really excited to hear that you have plans for the Arboretum to be more of an Arboretum. Community gardens, food growing, an actual botanic garden will be so incredibly exciting to me. Especially when I ride my bike down that treacherous path, there is this one turn where I hope that I'm not going to die. Seriously, every time. So excited that it's not fourth. Yay. Okay, moving on to I know Mark mentioned the Boulder Beach parking, and you didn't want to talk about it, which is totally fine. You don't have to. But I'm curious about the parking for the 13th Street area as well. Are we just counting on the lots that are right to the other way? What's our plan? Because I think this is going to be so popular that I just hope we have a place to put people, even if it's far away and we have to, people have to take scooters to the park or whatever.
Actually, that's a nice segue. There's a few thoughts we've got, and we're still assessing it, in all honesty. But we are looking parking as a whole, and so we're looking at adjacencies for parking and how do you utilize it beyond, just the civic area. Nate touched on the public-private partnership work we'll be doing. There is an opportunity there to think about some kind of parking garage. That might be a little bit longer term, but working with our partners, how might that emerge? And then the last thing I'll mention is you touched on it, the mobility hub. How do we frankly ask people to say, maybe don't drive your car, maybe take a scooter, maybe take a bike, maybe take a bike taxi. So the mobility hub would provide a place where you can store your stuff safely and then head off to the farmer's market, or to the play area. So we're just putting all of those sort of into the hopper as we move into design development to truly think that through.
Okay, great. So I have two things I want to say. First of all, the bike valet / bike parking, I'm hoping is going to be better than it is now / bigger. Is it?
I'd like to say yes. I'd say as we come back in fall of 2026, hopefully we'll be able to fully answer that question and you'll be happy with the answer.
Okay, great. And was there anything else about that? I'm trying to remember. Oh, yes. I had a recent experience and, anecdote, Tara, here I am, where I bought a lot of peaches and it was so heavy, all the peaches in my bag, that I couldn't figure out how to get from my car, which is parked away from the farmer's market. So now I'm wondering, what do we do about the older people, seniors, etc., and how do we get our stuff to these faraway places? Because I can't take a scooter with I can't. I'd like to feel I was that person, but I'm not that person. So another thought would be what to do about those type of small, and like Tina said, these are small little details, but all my experiences, I'm just thinking about as this older person and how that was really hard for me. Plus I bought a lot of jam, which was quite heavy.
No, I do appreciate that. We actually just at Burke Park, to the south of the city, with a Fraser's Centre there, we've had feedback from older adults that even the walks along the paths there could do with a few more benches just for resting in between or when people go out for strolls. So we do recognize how do we take care of an aging population with more, frankly, programming support as well as physical design of the site.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say that I asked two young people to carry my bags and we wound up becoming friends. They were women, they were in a band, and I each gave them a peach. And so they were really excited about that. So, utilizing young people is also not a bad idea, which made two new friends. But I'm going to end with the absolute wonderful Wildwood Park, which, Mark, if you've never been there, it is incredible. I spent a lot of summer days there with my grandchildren and they absolutely loved it. And I think what I love best about it is just free play and making up games just from the structure. Some of those games involved throwing your little kids throwing themselves off of very high pieces of wood, but there should be some of that in a kid's life. And so I just wanted to thank the Parks and Rec Department for giving us such a wonderful structure to enjoy our summer.
I do appreciate that. And as a park planning manager, I have to say we followed all AATS standard code for the site in terms of safety. And if you don't mind me just saying, part of that project was our forestry team in the city who, have to take down trees that are unsafe or are dying. And they were at the time chipping them, and we were able to partner with them where they started to collect the trees for the site. So everything you're seeing in there was free, and the total cost, if you take out in-house staff labor, was $14,000, which typically would be about $200,000. So what was exciting was it sounds like it was successful, but it was also sustainable, and we were able to be pretty cost efficient in that process.
I'm going to suggest one more thing, and then I promise you that's it for me, is since you did a lot of homemade stuff, you could actually, what would be great if I was a kid, but sometimes I act like one, I would want new stuff every year. So that way the kids would say, well, what's new here? And since you did it in such an efficient and you reusing way with, wood products that were already dying, that would be another great thing that we could have change in the park. So the kids are always looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Ryan.
Okay, I have a few questions. Tina prompted a thought, which is about the interaction between the market and whatever businesses in this space and the vis-a-vis Pearl Street, and that there might be a concern about competition. I suppose I'm wondering, has the team heard any concerns about that? Can you just speak to your thinking on that as an issue?
Yeah, Ali, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I'll just share. So we have included Downtown Boulder Partnership as one of the, priority community organizations that we've talked to and presented on the Civic Area Plan a couple of times, including, their board and participants, many of the restaurant owners, and we've not heard that concern.
Okay. Thank you. Related, and forgive me if I missed this, but can you talk more about the physical pedestrian experience of connecting between Pearl Street and the area with respect to potential for calming measures, raised sidewalks, or if we are thinking about that yet, and that's for a later date. I don't know. Just could you comment on how are we thinking about what will need to happen in that space?
Yeah, we're mindful of it when we haven't advanced it yet. There is Pearl Street will be starting to get advanced in 2026 for in readiness for the 27th 50th anniversary. So minor maintenance repairs there. And then obviously as we develop Civic, we're trying to be mindful of that. But at the moment, there isn't projects on the book to actually physically fund the connections in terms of improvements. It's more just focusing on the two areas themselves. And if there's anyone else on the team who'd like to speak to that from transport, let me know if I've missed anything there.
So is there a conceptual plan though? I realize it hasn't been funded, but are there concepts for how the pedestrian experience will look any different?
I would say what we're trying to do is think of, as we do the park management plan and think of space activation, what are the opportunities to go beyond Civic? And let's just say there's a, electric train that runs around the area that someone thinks of. That could go to Pearl, go to Civic, head around up the Arboretum. But we haven't got the actual describing what projects would look like or programs at this point.
Okay, fine.
Ryan, I'm thinking that's also one we can get back to you on, because I do know that in coordination, Mark has been working very closely with his colleagues in transportation and mobility and aligning CIPs. And of course, they've got the 14th Street project with the RTD expansion and those connections. And so I do think that there are things being conceived and we can get back to you maybe with a little more information.
That's
okay, fine. I mean, actually, no need to get back to me specifically. I'll just make a comment on this when we get to comments for your consideration.
Great.
Thank you. And then I think my last question is also on the access and transportation front. Can you talk about the public transit experience with respect to how and where are people arriving and or leaving the area using transit now? And then how, if at all, do you expect for that to evolve as we go forward?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think part of this will be the East Bookend development and whether that, what type of parking occurs there and what capacity that can accommodate if that project moves forward. We also have the existing parking on site, which will remain because obviously phase 2 just focuses on the Central Park area and 13th Street. And I mentioned earlier the mobility hub. That is one of the key things we've been working with our transport partners on. How do we think about ways to bring people into the civic area other than by car, and then have a safe space where they can park whatever form of transit they're on? And when I've worked on this in the past, sometimes as you've got charging stations, bike repair kits, etc. As you do that to also encourage people to come down and have opportunities for additional services as they do that.
Can you say a little more though about the public transit, the experience of who is using the bus? So I'm talking about the bus right now. If you're coming to the park, for example, I look at the northeast corner of 14th and Canyon. Our biggest transit hub for the region is right there. But anyway, I'm just thinking about where and how are people accessing physically with transit now? How will that evolve?
Yeah, to be honest, I'll defer to our transport people if they're here to respond to that, or otherwise we're, again, would be happy to get back to you with more information on that as we research it.
And I think, Brian, yeah, it goes back to the previous point on with the 14th Street expansions and the expanded bus bays. It really is just about making sure there's good wayfinding as any East Bookend development happens for the major arrivals that happen with 14th Street and the RTD station. And then Nate, if you'll confirm with me, the rest of the design leaves existing stations. So the arrivals on Broadway that are right there mid-Central Park, that's going to stay, and they're thinking about
Correct.
that connection and welcomingness.
Yeah, a pathway connects that right into the Central Park.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's all I have for questions. So just a few comments. Overall, I think it's great. I agree with what Aaron said, and it's wonderful. So, and I'll just maybe highlight a few things I like. Love the restrooms, the plan for us to have accessible restrooms that are open. I the probability that we'll have a year-round farmers market sounds like this is something we continue to work towards. I think that sounds really excellent. And I do think Tina has a good point about yeah, just more generally having a good integrated plan with the whole downtown district with respect to restaurants, businesses, and the whole kind of economy, making that cohesive. And then I guess I would say sort of a related point is just, yeah, I think it will be a success factor for this will be that there is a calm, positive experience for people who are walking, riding a bike, rolling in some way between the two, which currently there is a 4-lane arterial separating the spaces, and it needs that's going to need some real attention. So anyway, I know we're not ready for that detail yet, but just that if and when this comes up again, I would expect this to be an important part, or at least when it's appropriate for us to be looking at. And then on the transit front, also just as a suggestion, if we're effective in our overall efforts to create more transit oriented development, where more people can get around without a car and the bus service works really well, we are going to enjoy having a lot more people, a lot more shoppers, but a lot more people being in the area and wanting to come to the area without a car. But that's going to depend on a really good capacity for buses and transit in general to be able to stop, let people off, go about their business. And from a regional standpoint, the downtown Boulder station, I mean, this could become a really exciting place to have a farmer's market and more going on nearby as people, eventually maybe we'll have coordinated bus service to a ski train coming out of Arvada. We can have people doing all kinds of, hub use of that area as a hub. So I'll just be, really excited to think about what is the experience of somebody using transit as this community builds a more transit oriented future. So look forward to that in our next iterations. And I think I just had one more thought, and it was there was a little bit of discussion about safety / perception of public safety, and I would encourage that we we embrace these questions, and not just in terms of the future phases of this work, but today, and become more as a community, or sorry, as a government, more I don't know, sort of visible in our responses to these. Maybe that's not the right metaphor, but vocal in our responses to what's going on with public safety. Is it safe to be in the Civic area right now? What's the difference between real safety and perceived safety? And just making this more a part of how we communicate with the public about what's going on downtown. I think that is going to be a prerequisite to asking folks to trust us that it's going to be good in the future. And I do trust it, but I think there's just there's some work we have to do to talk about it. thank you to the team. I think this is really great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Nicole.
Thank you. And thanks to Ali and Mark for answering my questions, a lot of them earlier today. I appreciate that. One of the things so I just have feedback at this point. One of the things I'm really excited about is the way that, and I see this in parks especially, but really in everything we're doing these days, that parks aren't just playgrounds, right? We're creating them so that they are meeting the infrastructure needs that we have for economic things, social things. They're incorporating climate resilience and disaster mitigation. And I think that is really awesome and commendable and very forward thinking that we're doing that and really investing proactively into things that are going to last for many, many decades to come versus just building a one-off thing. So I really appreciate that. Just a couple of specific things I'm pretty excited about: the public restrooms, because we've been hearing about that need for a long time. So I'm very excited about that. And then also the year-round farmers market, having a space for something like that, I think would be a wonderful thing for the community, especially as we think more about our local food systems. And then having more small spaces for people to gather in smaller groups. I really like that component as well. Beyond that, what I'm most excited about is more about the way that we're going about doing all this versus specific components of it. And so it blends a little bit with number 2. So I'll probably be quiet for the second question, but using sustainable materials. I love this in that it's more, it is more aligned with our climate goals, but also to Tara's point, they can, as they run out, they can be replaced with new things, and kids love new things. Most of us do. So I think that's a really exciting part of that, and it feels like we're getting a lot of bang for our buck there when we're going about that. I really appreciate the climate resilience component of it. So as we're working on this space, that we're going to have a space that can bounce back more easily after floods and need less sort of repair and restoration, because it's really designed with flooding in mind and with being a part of that system. I really appreciate the universal design components coming in. I think that's going to make it much more accessible to a lot of our community, especially as our population is aging. And I think that fits so well to some of Ryan's points with the downtown station expansion, because that will offer people a nice way to get down there. I already mentioned that incorporating small spaces. I think that's just, it's so, I hear that from community too, that they're really looking for those kinds of places. So I also appreciate that we're fulfilling our commitment to voters in building all of this infrastructure. It will be more sustainable, it will be more equitable, it will be more resilient when it's all done. And I think all that is right in line with our financial strategy and where we're heading with that too. So that seems like really good alignment too. And then just given how much of our budget still depends on sales tax, which we will hopefully address over time. But for now, it is so important that we're getting a space that is attracting people and bringing them in so that we are generating that revenue that then funds all the other things that we do within our city. So I think this is wonderful work. I'm really excited to see it all move forward, and just thank you for everything that you've been doing to bring in all kinds of different feedback and try to figure out how to do this all with our budget as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nicole. And I will just wrap us up with some feedback I have. In general, I concur with my colleagues on just the awesomeness of the approach and the concept, and just the thoughtfulness as it relates, just particularly some of the fiscal piece. I really appreciate, like, we can't cost out everything because that costs money too. So let's really work with what we have. And so I feel really good about that. I echo the bathrooms, the maintenance, the connection to the hill, the food component, and and this is where I'll pivot to feedback. Although I am more focused than, well, no, I've always been focused on agriculture, but even more so after the latest brouhaha with SNAP and food accessibility and availability, and just really hopeful that we can continue to strengthen and prioritize, right? Like, it's not just a nice to have a food market, right? That there are other things that our community significantly benefits by having that food market all year round. And so again, just yes, it's great for climate, but it's also great for some of the human services that we know are not going to be supplemented federally or at the county level anymore. And so just really wanting to maximize as much of our city space to address the food security, affordability, and quality. So I would just love to as we're looking, as you're thinking about how to prioritizing that space. I didn't see that space in the or rather in phase two as a priority. So I would love to see that. The other piece is the ditch. So, there's the ditch where they want to have it covered versus not covered, the little green space there. And as a former commissioner of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, I know very much what it's like to have to balance the needs and wants of a variety of different interest groups. But the group that I feel like needs a little bit more support are the voiceless. And so I'm going to go with our habitat and our wildlife that actually benefit from that water flowing through that little piece right there. And I do feel like there's a sufficient amount of green space on the one side, then on the other side, and there's a Brit. Like, I just have some concerns around covering ditches if we don't have to. And yes, I know there's an argument. Well, there's water over there. Well, I'm so sorry, but there's more humans, and we need more habitat, and we need it everywhere we can possibly get it. So I would not. Although I appreciate the survey, those people are not necessarily experts in habitat and habitat restoration and biodiversity. And although this is the West Side, we still have significant connectivity issues. So anytime I can preserve something that we already spent a lot of money doing with ditches in the first place, I would rather do that. And then lastly, the engagement, and I, again, just blown away by the level of engagement. And there was one group that I didn't hear very much. And again, it could be an oversight, but I do want to lift it up, and that's our Indigenous and our tribal. So Indigenous, especially, it's interesting. Somebody mentioned in the presentation that, we want to hear from our community, and this community wouldn't exist without the stolen land that we are on. We still owe a debt. And I would just love to see us really being thoughtful about both the Indigenous and tribal, which are two separate. Tribal is our sovereignty. I'm looking forward to more engagement in 2026, and would be very disappointed if there's no tribal engagements until 2027, because that's not a relationship if I don't talk to you in years at a time. And I think certainly for our Indigenous, I know that Parks and Open Space respectively do a lot of work in relationship building, et cetera, with our Indigenous population. But again, I just want to honor that relationship is different than our other stakeholders and interest groups because of the debt that we owe, which I calculate at roughly 300 million, not including water, not including minerals, not including agricultural, per the TREC historic loss report of 1.17 trillion for the state of Colorado. I just back of the envelope city of Boulder, and that's around 300 million. So anytime we're talking about tribal and Indigenous, I just want to remind us all that we owe a debt, and this is not charity. And so, I've heard Rick, his last name isn't Hess. I can't remember his last name. My apologies, Rick, who's with the people of the Sacred Land and led that work and research. But, he talked about tribal embassies. I know Denver is considering something, but, as we're looking at buildings in that area, perhaps there is an opportunity to secure more space for our Indigenous and tribal community members, so that they don't have to, so that they have more agency and sovereignty when they're on their stolen Indigenous lands. And yeah, again, I know that we tend to go above and beyond as a city. You know, most cities don't do travel consultation, so I want to honor the work that we do as a city to go above and beyond. And yet I always just go back to, is this 300 million? How does this address the 300 million? Again, that doesn't even calculate water or agriculture or minerals. And so I just would love us to think creatively about how we can pay back some of that debt through this incredible work. That was it for me. Restrooms. Oh, food forests. So, although I appreciate the idea of having one food forest somewhere, I'm just always very interested in how we can create more food growing throughout our community. Again, we saw what food insecurity the escalation of that. We have some mitigation with the opening of the government. However, I think we can anticipate, certainly with the increased healthcare costs that we can all anticipate in 2026, that we're going to continue to see food insecurity, food affordability, food quality. And I bring up the quality issues because, again, the escalation in different diseases, et cetera, because of the toxins and pollutants in our food. So I'm always just looking for that. So would just love to see, again, I think the partnership with the Boulder market is fantastic. And I love, the direction again for the market, but I don't want that space to just be the only space where food is. And really just thinking creatively about the ways that we can spread food. Again, it's biodiversity, it helps humans, it also helps, it helps everybody. So, but in general, just really blown away. And even with the fiscal constraint component, just recognizing, I think that there's a lot we can do. Mark, you mentioned those partnerships with CU Boulder. I know that food is a part of certainly a part of Chancellor Swart's big top three, food, energy, and water. And certainly I know we can work with the business chamber and the Latino chamber to think creatively about how we can potentially partner to activate. I also wanted to just briefly follow up with Ryan's comments around perceived versus actual safety. And I just really appreciate the numbers and going to the numbers and really relying on facts over feelings. And the facts are that the numbers are down. But I also honor that sometimes, when I'm riding my bike home from our council meetings, I can see how people have a perception of not feeling safe, but I've never had any instances or issues, even though it may look like it's not safe during some times of day. So I really want to honor and respect that. And then lastly, trash is on my mind, and composting and recycling for some reason. I know this isn't a big issue, but for this particular area and this particular project, but it was something that I didn't really see covered. And so as a representative of RCAB, which is the Resource Conservation Advisory Board, I'm always thinking about our recycling and composting and how we can accelerate that. I know people have been really confused. And so I don't know. And then, I love the education spaces as well, and curious if there's also partnership opportunities with Boulder Valley School District on some of the outdoor schools, like you had mentioned before. And again, I think there's a real opportunity to, Jonathan Cohen mentioned last week, the whole of government approach and that intergovernmental. I really think that this has really rich opportunities to deepen those partnerships and weave our communities stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that ends that. Well done, everybody. We are, I want to thank Mark and Allie and the rest of the parks team for continuing to raise the bar on, not only on process. To me, equity is about power and power is about process. And I think you all do just an exemplary job of showing that the equitable process that is used to engage people throughout iteratively and not waiting to the end. So just want to always commend you all for the incredible work and the example that you all show. And now we are going to take these 11 minutes and move them over. Oh, yes,
Aisha.
Mayor. Yes, Mayor.
I think there was the second question for us from city staff.
Whoopsies. Well, then we are behind. So we have 10 minutes.
I think a
do the
lot of us
phase
covered it
review.
already, but there is
I
still
do
that second
feel
question.
strongly, many of you mentioned the monetary component. So if there's an additional component that has not already been discussed that you would like to add, feel free to do so in the next 11 minutes.
I can go if that's all right.
Yes, of course, Mayor.
Well, I mostly covered all in my earlier remarks, but just on the specifics of the phase two construction, just that I think the 13th Street concept is extremely exciting. And then I'm particularly interested to see what comes forward from the public-private partnerships on the East bookend. So it'd be really fascinating to see who comes forward with what, and look forward to evaluating those, because there's huge opportunities. And then that Atrium Market Hall experience is going to be phenomenal. So very excited about that as well. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Tara.
Quick question to staff. This was asked before, but I already forgot what they said, just to be clear. So when are we going to see that Atrium Marketplace open? Because I'm so excited. How long do we have to wait?
I think there's confusion. They think it's funded.
Yeah, just to be clear, the Atrium Market is part of the public-private partnership, East Bookend. So that will be working with the developers to see what emerges there. So we'll have to sort of hang fire and see how that comes together. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got a 1 to 2 year timeline to pull all that together and make sure it works in tandem with the phase 2 civic area project.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up, because I guess I would have been depressed if I didn't know tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina.
Yeah, just I'm excited for it, and I know staff is always good at reaching out when they need to let us know, but if there comes an issue that would help support a public-private partnership that would be creating a district, just to let us know early so that we understand what we might be looking at and what the structure of that might be.
Of course, yes.
Thank you, Tina. Any other comments or feedback for phase 2? Awesome. Well, thank you. Oh, we're gonna move these 9 minutes over. So thank you again, Mark, Ali, and the team for continuing to raise the bar and navigate us through this. Also, it's always important to have something joyous to bring us together around. So we have so many things that are not fun. And so to have something that's centered in joy, that's joy centered, that brings different interest groups across our community together is always a positive thing. And with 2026, I'm also curious how we can align this work with the 250-150 commemoration of the state of Colorado and the United States of America. Sorry. But I just lift that up because you all do so much great activation anyway that I see some really beautiful synergies around those items. So thank you so much. And now I'm going to go back to Nuria, I believe. And Heather, maybe? Not sure.
Yep, that would be correct.
Thank you.
The script was a little thin after that. I'm not really sure.
No, I was trying to find my button.
Go with it.
Thank you so much. And I just appreciate you lifting up the joy of this project, Councilmember Adams, because it is in fact a joyful project. A lot of engagement went into that. For our next item, I want to welcome our intergovernmental officer, Heather Stauffer, who is new to presentation. I ask that you all be very, very nice to Heather as she presents our 2026 policy statement on regional, state, and federal issues. So Heather, I give you the mic.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me all right? Awesome. Well, first hurdle conquered. Thanks, Nuria. Thank you, everyone. My name is Heather Stauffer, Intergovernmental Affairs Officer for the City of Boulder. I'm very pleased to be here today to present our proposed 2026 policy statement on regional, state, and federal issues. So I think that you have my slides. Whenever you're ready. And then also, if we could ensure that Will Coyne is promoted to a panelist, that would be awesome. And you can go ahead and move to the next slide. All right, so our goals for this evening are to receive direction from council to finalize the 2026 policy statement, and then also prepare council a bit to participate in advocacy efforts in 2026. Next slide, please. So the purpose and use of the 2026 policy statement. Our city's policy statement creates a framework that's intended to provide clear guidance for staff and council, as well as the community on how the city will handle various issues and topics that we encounter on the regional, state, and federal levels. Its intent is to ensure consistent decision-making and consistent messaging in the advocacy space. It allows for quick response time, which is crucial for effective advocacy work. It also ensures that we use the majority of our political capital on identified priorities. You'll see here on the slide, we use the policy statement to guide our work with various regional, state, and federal partners. The policy statement is primarily housed within the city's advocacy team, and we'll work to translate that into action, working with many different partners, both inside and outside of the city. So next slide, please. So this is the city's advocacy team. You'll see several new faces, including my own, and some familiar faces here for most of you. In addition to myself, we have Megs Valier and Megan Wilson Outcalt. Both have agreed to help me this year in the advocacy space in addition to their regular full-time jobs at the city, so I'm grateful for their help. We also have our lobbying teams which support our efforts. Will Coyne with Headwater Strategies is in the center bottom row there. He helps us out at the state capitol, and then Christian Chin and Brett Garson with Smith and Garson as our lobbyists on the federal level in DC. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we have our council advocacy. As our leaders, you have a large role to play in the city's advocacy efforts. Because of your positions, your voices, and your relationships amplify our collective message. Because of that, it's very important that we're speaking with one voice when it comes to advocacy on behalf of the city. Part of my job is to help coordinate that messaging through various means. Depending upon the strategy, you may be asked to testify at the state capitol or to help educate elected officials on city programs, etc. Of course, we also have our Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, which we work directly with on policy. A quick reminder that Tuesday, December 2nd is our breakfast with our state legislative delegation. And will be a great opportunity for council to advocate on some of our priorities that we'll be discussing this evening. We also work very closely with advocacy partners outside the city, which are listed here. So I just want to quickly go over some principles of effective advocacy that I hope to promote in 2026. So developing and maintaining strong relationships with elected officials, having some solid relationships with decision makers is really a foundation for any kind of successful advocacy. And when I say solid relationships, it doesn't mean that we always agree with one another. It does mean, however, that we have open communication with one another and a level of trust that will enable conversations to take place. Second point here, staying aligned. So we're always stronger when we row in the same direction. The most effective organizations have one message and they know what their priorities are so they can work towards them together. And then finally, strategic actions. This is an area that I will be focused on a lot and coordinating with each of you. Each political entity has only so much political capital to use in a year. Our policy statement priorities should reflect where we want to use the majority of that political capital each year. So having an overlay of strategy over our entire advocacy program really ensures that we're positioning the city for success now and in the future. I don't know if Will is on yet, but I think he was going to give us a little preview of what to expect in 2026. So do we have him?
He just got
Yay,
here.
awesome. Perfect. Take it away, Will.
Hi, everybody. My name's Will Coyne, and hold on here. I am on video. Are you all able to see me now? Great.
You can see that.
I just wanted to talk real quickly about upcoming things to expect in the state legislature. As you can imagine, this is a question I get all the time. I think for any of you all that have spent any time around the state legislature, I think that the answer is always the same. It's everything, everywhere, all at once. Our legislative process is very small d democratic. Every member of the General Assembly gets to introduce 5 bills. Every one of those bills is live. It's guaranteed a hearing and a vote. So we're very, very different than a lot of big state legislatures or the United States Congress. So there will be probably upwards of 700 bills coming in the next session, similar to what's been happening in the last few years. Many people don't know we pass more laws at the state legislature here than any state in the entire country. We have an almost 80% passage rate. So a bill gets introduced, it's probably going to get negotiated down, but it is much more likely to pass than it is to fail. So it really, like when it comes to issues, it's very hard to talk about which issue is going to pop because there are going to be so many. The biggest defining issue right now is all about the state budget. I think I'm sure that you all are quite familiar because it has such an impact at the local level as well. We've got arguably the tightest budget that I've seen in my 20-year career down there. Last year, they had a very difficult job of balancing almost a billion-dollar budget shortfall, and that was before the big beautiful bill passed in Congress, the Trump bill that really whacked the state additionally here by almost $1 billion because our tax code is heavily linked to the federal. That combined with an ever-increasing caseload responsibility for the state means that the budget coming into this year is again really challenged. So I think it is more true now than at any point in my career that if a bill comes forward with a new program of any kind that requires general fund expenditure, it is almost for sure not going to pass. So that will be a pretty key dynamic in the coming year. There's also just a handful of quick political dynamics I'll mention before Heather keeps going. First of all, it is Governor Jared Polis's final year. The city of Boulder should really enjoy having their own resident as governor for one more year. I think it's really key because I think we will see a real test of the governor's power as each week passes in the state legislature and he heads toward true lame duck status. I think you could already sense and feel in a lot of the discussions out there that he'll be facing a lot more pushback than he might otherwise. The second thing is that there's a very intense, relatively new debate happening within the Democratic caucuses in the legislature between moderates and more progressive caucuses. And I think it's likely the natural outgrowth of Colorado really becoming a more solidly blue state and having really sizable Democratic majorities. As that matures, the fight between moderates and progressives has really become a defining thing that I think we'll see this session. And last thing to mention is just it's an election year. Obviously, we have those every 2 years, but it's a big deal. And there's a bunch of members, 5 or 6 different state legislators that are running for either state constitutional office or for the US Congress. So as always, it will be a big, giant, fat mess, but it's great to see you all. Thanks for including me, Heather, and we're continue to be proud to represent the city of Boulder.
Thanks so much, Will. Sorry, I wasn't saying to advance the slides. Could you advance the slide? All right, so we're going to go over some recommended changes for the policy statement for 2026. I'm going to go over policy priorities first. I've mentioned before, but our policy priorities are where we intend to use the most political capital in any given year. So for 2026, our staff is proposing 1 regional, 4 state, and 5 federal policy priorities. Just a note that in the slides, new language is in red and underlined. You also have in your materials a summary of substantive changes, which can be a helpful guide. You'll also have the draft policy statement that has all the changes reflected in that document if you'd like to follow along. So for our regional policy priorities, they have largely stayed the same. There's still a lot happening in this space in terms of housing, mental and behavioral health. So we felt it was appropriate to keep them another year. Oh, if you could advance the slide, I'm so sorry. So you'll see that all of that language has stayed the same. Next slide, please. For state policy priorities, we've opted to keep policy priority number 1 the same from last session, which is fully fund and protect the city's ability to reduce and prevent homelessness. We didn't really see much success in this space last session due to the budget. House Bill 1032, which was improving infrastructure to reduce homelessness, died. But I'm hopeful that these efforts will be taken up again. I do believe that we'll see another version of 1032 this upcoming session, and there'll be more opportunities to push these policies. So we've kept that the same. The second policy priority here is establishing an on-bill repayment program for accessible energy upgrades. This bill was lost last session, but it will run again this session. So we're working through the finer points of that policy now, but generally the ideal will remain the same, in that we're trying to create a program that can remove obstacles of having to pay upfront costs for energy efficient renewable energy or electrification upgrades, ultimately making those upgrades more accessible and contributing to the city's climate goals. Next slide, please. Here we go. So our third policy priority is new. This is protect essential state funding. And what Will was talking about with the state budget, the state's coming into this session, we heard today, with a $1 billion deficit. So we need the ability to work to protect funding that is important to city programs and to community. A note here that we've added language in response to the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee request to include funding that addresses community members' basic needs. So you'll see that added as well. And then our fourth state policy priority is artificial intelligence. We know that there will be cleanup legislation around Senate Bill 205, which is consumer protections for artificial intelligence, next session. We've heard from our staff that Senate Bill 205, as written, will have some pretty severe impacts to the city's current uses of AI technology and could increase the city's liability to unacceptable levels. I think because California has passed AI legislation, we could see a policy that more closely follows what they're doing. But we'd want to ensure that any policy we see as a city, as a deployer of the technology, we don't take on unreasonable amounts of liability, and that the definitions are narrow and clear. So we've added that into our state policy priorities. Just a note, we have removed the priority on banning assault weapons from last session because of the passage of Senate Bill 3, but I'll note that that language around gun violence prevention still lives in the policy statement in the new 49. We also removed the priority on vulnerable road user fees. Due to the tight state budget, it's very unlikely that this will come forward again because it requires a lot of funding. But the language does still exist in policy item 67, furthering the city's Vision Zero action plan. So those were some things that we removed. Next slide, please. So federal priorities. Our first federal priority is to support congressionally directed spending requests. We have begun the process with our budget team to identify with departments unmet funding that could be pursued through CDS. There was a question on timing for that in the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. So typically January through February, members of Congress will announce that they're accepting CDS requests, and then most offices have deadlines in March or early April for constituents to submit requests. So we're well ahead of the curve on that, and we're making progress there. The second federal priority we've identified is a holdover from last year around the Northwest Area Mobility Study projects. We've updated some of that language to add Colorado 7, as it's likely the next priority for the Northwest Area Mobility Study corridor. And then our third priority there is to support the passage of the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. We do think it's important to advocate for some specific changes within this bill. Specifically, staff has noted a lot of challenges with the pass-through of federal dollars from the Federal Highway Administration through CDOT down to local governments. CDOT places a lot of additional criteria, which ultimately slows down the projects and makes them more expensive. So we'd like to see those dollars being distributed directly to locals. There was some question in Intergovernmental Affairs Committee whether that would put us in a more vulnerable position in terms of clawbacks from the federal government. I did run that question by our federal lobbyists, and the answer I received was no, not more than we already are. So we'd also like to see some prioritization of those funds for maintenance and resilience improvement projects over some expansion projects. We'd like to see some additional support in this legislation to bring rail crossing treatments up to standard, transit electrification programs, amongst others. We've also specified funding for transit operations to support service frequency and reliability, and investment in passenger rail expansion, specifically highlighting the Front Range passenger rail. Next slide, please. All right. Actually, can you go back one? Thank you. Okay, so our fourth federal priority is to support clean water and drinking water state revolving funds. And I'm going to hand this over to Megan Wilson Outcult to talk about.
Thanks, Heather, and good evening, City Council. My name is Megan Wilson Outcult, and I'm the Water Quality Senior Manager for Utilities. We added this federal priority to support full authorization of the state revolving funds, or SRFs. Those are funded by Congress and administered by states, and they provide low-interest loans for local drinking water and wastewater infrastructure projects. Over the past few years, the way that some water projects are funded has changed, and SRFs have not been fully funded. So this language just supports that full authorization for critical water infrastructure needs.
Awesome, thank you. And then our fifth federal priority came from our Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. We wanted to increase our activity and support for the federal labs in Boulder who are facing increasing challenges in terms of funding cuts. So we've pulled some existing language into the policy priorities here. Next slide, please. So I'm moving now from priorities to the general language of the policy statement. I don't have time to go over each of these in great detail, just highlight them, but I'm happy to answer any questions on them during our discussion. We've added some language in the policy principles section just to more accurately reflect our current fiscal environment. Next slide, please. Changes to our building climate resilience came from staff. They recommended adding language to reflect updates in the work that they do in hardening of infrastructure, making sure we're including economic resilience in the climate resilience discussion, and food and supply security language, which is consistent with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. Next slide, please. Engaging in climate action efforts, we've added language around polluter accountability. We know that there have been talks at the federal level from oil and gas companies around limiting local government's ability to initiate climate liability lawsuits or enacting liability shields. So we've added language to address that and preserve local control in this area. Next slide, please. We've added language which reflects our human rights ordinance. Note that this change was made after the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee met, so this is new for everyone. Also, at the request of the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, we did add language that states that we are opposed to laws or policies that impose funding limitations or restrictions on programs based on gender identity, or that create barriers to service. Next slide, please. This request came from staff. It adds language to our existing policy to make sure that we're considering survivors of crime or domestic violence in our immigration language. And then we've also updated this section with more relevant language to better describe what we're seeing at the federal level in terms of laws, executive orders, guidance, etc. Next slide, please. This is an ongoing effort from last year. There may be legislation to establish an enterprise which would place a fee on lead bullets, the money being used for CPW for habitat acquisition and management to support rare or endangered species. If that does move forward, it will probably run in 2027, but we wanted to add some language into our policy statement to reflect that. Next slide, please. So we know that there's FCC proposed rulemaking and a notice of inquiry on the federal level. They are looking for ways to reduce state and local control around the placement and design of wireless facilities. We've heard from staff that if that's implemented, these changes could require us to substantially revise our wireless facility regulations, our review processes, and could greatly affect the city's ability to limit the visual impact of these facilities within the community. So we've added language to allow us to oppose those efforts. Next slide, please. Staff recommendations to add language to safeguard state and federal transportation funding and to make updates in terminology in the transportation section. Next slide, please. This is a staff recommendation because we are starting to see automated vehicles in the region, staff is suggesting updates with more specifics related to managing those vehicles, related to safety, tools to enforce local traffic laws, and the city's ability to enforce equity-focused requirements, and that they don't take away from transit and other non-vehicle modes of transportation. Next slide, please. This is also staff recommendation. We've added language to our Vision Zero action plan to support measures to ensure that e-bikes and micro-mobility devices are safely integrated into the transportation system. This is going to have an emphasis on education and safety for youth. Next slide, please. And I will send this over to Megan Wilson-Outcalt to talk about.
Thanks. This was also a staff recommendation to add just a little bit of language around economic feasibility as it relates to water quality regulations. And that just recognizes that as those regulations become more stringent, the cost to comply can become burdensome to the community, especially without an adequate planning horizon. And this language also mirrors and lends support to ongoing efforts at the state level to consider the feasibility of implementing water quality regulations. Next slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. So that concludes our presentation, and I will hand it back over to Councilmember Adams.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have a question. Thank you so much for that presentation. Wonderful first inaugural presentation. And we have 3 questions. And we have until 9 o'clock. So we have a good amount of time for them. But I just want to get us right off the gate with my fellow council members about just how much time we're going to take on the first round. Really want to make sure that everybody has a chance to provide their feedback. So the first question is, does council have any questions about how the proposed policy statement is used to engage in advocacy efforts? The second question is, does council have any questions or concerns about the principles, priorities, positions? And then the third is proposed additional additions to the policy statement. So we'll take the first one around any questions that you have about how the proposed policy statement is used to engage in our advocacy efforts. Matt.
Thanks, Taisha. Heather, Will, Megan, and Megs, and everybody, thank you guys so much. And Heather, it's just great to have you on the team. Your experience and professionalism pays on this. It's great to have you, and it's going to be a tough session in front of us for sure. My question is really just more for those of us that maybe, for the rest of the council who isn't on intergovernmental affairs, who maybe isn't used to working with your predecessor and Will and Headwater Strategies, but also for the public who's listening, in terms of how we structure the policy statement. Is it better for your work in working with legislators and knowing how to sort of take what's written and run with it in terms of going for a positive outcome, or to resist or oppose? Is it better to be very general on a subject or be hyper detailed and specific? What's the better way for us to structure the writing of our policy statement to best equip you with the tools, but also flexibility to deal with what is very an agile and sometimes rapidly dynamic situation on at the Capitol? So that's maybe a question for Heather and Will, because I think there's a challenge for how prescriptive are we versus how general, and where's that sweet spot for how best to allow you to do your job on behalf of the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Benjamin. I think in terms of a policy statement, it is better to have more broad statements around the city's positions that can be filled in with details in conversations with our Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, for example. The challenge that we see if you get too prescriptive in a policy statement is that you are constantly having to go back and re-edit and take things out that are no longer relevant. And you can back yourself almost into a corner if you get too prescriptive, because policy is not, I mean, I like to think that I know everything that's going to happen with policy, but that's not the case, right? And Will can attest to that. So if we get too prescriptive, we're not able to be as flexible as maybe we need to be, whereas we have general statements around what the city will support versus oppose. We can be a little bit more flexible in terms of the details. So that would be my recommendation if we're looking at construction of a policy statement. We have a very large policy statement, 50 pages plus. So adding more and more and more and more onto it, it just becomes a little bit unmanageable at some point. So
perfect. And that was going to be really, like you led into my follow-up question, is just in terms of keeping what's right in front of us and what's pragmatic or possible or what we sense is coming from the legislature versus a wish list of things. Because I know that there's a lot of things that we all advocate and want to see happen, but may not be anywhere near in front of us or actionable.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, is there a place to, so we don't have this obese policy statement, is it useful to have that be what's maybe the pragmatic stuff in front of it? And then maybe have a separate thing that is our, utopian wish list of things that at some point we would love to see happen, versus having this, you're bringing the King James Bible to the Capitol every time to plant in front of our legislature's lap. So I'm just sort of wondering, how do you envision those tensions of wanting all the things in there versus what's really actionable?
So I think in terms of things that we really want to be actionable and we know are predicated on political interest and things moving forward, we really want to make sure that our policy priorities reflect legislation that we anticipate versus more of perhaps a wish list for the future. I think it's okay in our general policy statement to have language that, if we happen to encounter this issue, this is how the city will react, as long as we're keeping it not too prescriptive. But definitely in those policy priorities section, we want to make sure that that's predicated on political interest, on the idea that these things will move forward in some way or shape or form. We anticipate these things will move forward in some way, shape, or form in this upcoming session.
Thank you for that clarifier. I appreciate it. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you. Tina?
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions. So following up a little bit with what Matt was asking about. So in the situation where we as a city council have prioritized something, but there's not pending legislation, and for instance, last year we pursued legislation at the end of the session with the relationship with the legislator. And let's say now, what would be the process you would envision for us if we really wanted to originate legislation and develop it and carry it through, including the identification of a sponsor and the language development?
Thank you. I appreciate that question. So initiating legislation, I would imagine that we would want to put that into our policy priorities section. But we want to do that we want to identify that relatively early on. So perhaps when the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee meets, we can identify if we want initiated legislation, because we do have to identify sponsors, and they will have their bill list probably around December finalized. So if we want a spot in that bill list, we need to talk to them early to ensure that there's interest. So I'm happy to develop more of a process for specifically for initiated legislation for the city, if that would be helpful, and with timelines.
I'm just one voice, so
yeah,
we can.
But I think it's a really good idea.
Okay, great. And then the second thing I think probably falls in the more work category, so I apologize for that in advance. But because of the impacts of the JBC decisions on the budget, is there a way for us to receive something, even if it's a forwarded article, but that gives us an update on what is the progress of the budget changes, and just so we're looking at the same information as we're learning about what's at risk from the state budget and moving forward? And I don't even know if that would be in your group or not, so.
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. We are going to be monitoring the state budget. Megs Valier has, I guess she volunteered, and I really grabbed hold of that, so she can't back out of it now. But she is going to be monitoring the JBC and decisions from the JBC this session. I know that Will and his team also have opportunities to monitor JBC actions, so we'll work with them to ensure that we're on top of what's happening there. We also coordinate with some of our outside advocacy partners who provide updates on what's happening with the JBC in more specific terms around transportation and local government. So we can consolidate that, and I can include those in my regular updates to council, or more frequently if that's needed.
Thanks, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any further hands for question number 1 around the how. Gonna go ahead and move us to number 2, which are questions or concerns around the principles, priorities, or positions contained in the proposed policy statement. And again, because we are a self-governing body, I invite us to really try and stay within 3 to 5 minutes for this, because we have an additional question after around proposed. I also want to remind you that we can continue by using the hotline and other mechanisms to continue these conversations before we have to vote, I believe tentatively scheduled December 4th. So on that note, again, I will do some kind of signal, not sure what it is yet, when you've hit that 3-minute mark. And then you can self-regulate from there. All right, who would like to kick us off on questions or concerns around principles, priorities, or positions contained in the proposed policy statement? Mark.
Well, I guess I get it by default. My concern is with paragraph 22, which attempts to create a formula for those occasions on which we will surrender our home rule authority. Doing so is an exceedingly rare event. I believe I've only seen it once, and that was last year. And in a document that is facing out, this is a particular provision that faces in and is basically telling us how we should analyze those situations. I don't think we should be codifying the conditions under which we surrender our home rule authority. I think each case, and it's not that it'll never happen again, but each case should be unique and should be discussed on its own merits. I think the second paragraph of that section gets it right, where we say that, quote, the city supports state policy changes that incentivize and encourage local governments to adopt land use policies such as transit-oriented development. I think that's the proper approach. I think we don't need and shouldn't be adopting a formula in advance as the conditions under which we agree to surrender that home rule authority. It's not something we need to do, and I don't think we should do it except in the rarest of circumstances. And as I said, this is not an outward-facing policy. It's essentially our internal procedure, and I'm not sure it's really appropriate in this document. And again, it's not that will never occur again. It occurred last year, but each of those situations I think is relatively unique, and broadcasting to the world that we have a specific policy on how to do this, I don't even think it's accurate. I think each of those conversations is going to be independent and separate. So that's my concern.
Thank you, Mark. Tina.
Yeah, thank you. I echo Mark's concern also just about we do see examples where we do and don't support local control. And a good example was the solar panel legislation. We, of course, support solar panels, but in that case, it didn't work with our local zoning, is my understanding. And so we obviously support the intention, but in this case, the way it was written was not something we did because of a local control issue. So I thank you, Mark, for bringing that up. My other concern, which I'm not sure it doesn't. So I really like how you structured this as the priorities being actionable at the top, at the forefront as the priorities. I do wonder if we should place our commitment to anti-discrimination laws, including gender expression and gender identity, closer to the front of the document, just to elevate that particular piece. We are seeing some evidence that there might be some statewide initiatives that are counter to our anti-discrimination language in our city and our core values. So I might be interested in just seeing that up to the front. And part of this is because, to your point, when you have a document that is so dense and long, where you are in the first 5 or 6 pages does kind of give you a better pole position, whether, so I think that would be my only suggestion. And over time, I would like to see this document shorter. I think it's unlikely a legislator would read it from front to end, but if we hear feedback that legislators think this is at the right length, then carry on.
Nicole.
I didn't have a question until I heard Mark and Tina, and now I do. That policy point 22, we put that in back when there was a lot of land use legislation coming up, right? So I guess to that point, if it still feels relevant to have that in there, if we're gonna see more coming up and stuff like that, I'd be comfortable with leaving it in, though I certainly understand the concerns.
There will likely, so there's quite a bit of fatigue at the legislature around land use policies. There'll probably be a little bit of legislation dealing with some smaller issues around land use this year, potentially lot splitting, lot sizes, things like that, but there will not be this kind of overarching land use bills that deal with local control, so heavily that we've seen in the past. So that would just be my prediction.
Can I ask just one follow-up question to that? Heather, I think to this point about it being really long, this is kind of on your work plan, right? Of just thinking about how we trim this back from 70 some items. Is that right? So some of that may just unfold anyway.
I think just generally, as we're looking towards the future and future updates, we'll want to make these concepts a little bit more broad than specific. That's kind of just the idea that I had.
Okay, thank you very much. Ryan.
I also now have a question after hearing Tina speak, and Tina, you flashed another light bulb for me on your sort of vision of a legislator looking through all of this, and I suppose I have considered what I think is one of the values of the document is to provide essentially Heather you the direction to know in the moment this is what we've agreed that we care about, what we want to advance. It's to do it now, you know, outside of things coming at us quickly. And so while I understand that all else equal, a shorter document is easier than a longer document, it's also the case that what the job now is in part is to specify our positions so that you have and our lobbying team has what it needs to know what we, you know, specifically want to accomplish. Is that so? Sorry for the long preamble, but that's the question. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think there's a balance, right? Having some specifics in there is not a bad thing, of course, if that's, to your point, something we really, really care about within that policy. It's absolutely okay to call it out. Just generally, I think it's important to have larger buckets of than smaller buckets. That's all.
Thanks, Heather. Just sorry, but my question is about the use. Do I have it right that a purpose of this document is to give you and the advocacy team the instructions about what we wish to pursue now while things aren't coming at us, and so that you know that you have a majority vote or better, that these are the things we want. That's the purpose or a purpose of this.
Absolutely. It's to provide guidance to staff, to me, and also to council, and then also setting expectations with community, I would say, as well.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you
For this one.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
Oh, sorry, I jumped the gun there, Taisha. I apologize. So just wanted to just real quickly agree with Nicole that I think there is value in that item number 22, even if though we don't expect a lot of action this year in the housing area at the legislature, it does, I think, outline some areas in which we might be supportive if certain kinds of things did come through. So I just think it is performing a useful function. That's it.
All right, got through questions relative. Oh, right, I have questions. I was curious. Obviously, we know we are now past November 11th, and the negotiation on the Colorado River Basin was not reached. And so, just curious, where that is, because our state is negotiating. So there's a state component to that, and then there's also obviously the federal component to that. So just curious where that conversation was, where it landed, why we don't have anything. Any direction? Do you feel like you have the direction that you need around water? Water literacy is something, or climate literacy, sorry, is something that we had, I think, in our council priorities. It got woven in somewhere, but that means we talk about it and we advocate for it. So although I appreciate all of the other topics, I just was a little underwhelmed by 1/3 of our water shed and water resources not being meaningfully considered in advocacy.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure that I could give an update on the Colorado River at this moment, but
oh no, not my point of
you mean in terms of advocacy.
I meant
efforts.
like when I'm not on the intergovernmental team, although I hope to be in. I hope to be one day.
Right.
But I'm just curious if that conversation came up around if those negotiations failed, what positions did we want to take, if any, as a part of that, and just water in general. You know, again, there's other topics that are significantly more addressed, and yet we don't actually need them as humans to survive. So.
We did not discuss that during the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. That topic did not come up. I will say that primarily the state is in charge of negotiating on the Colorado River, as you know. So we have not taken an active role in that to this point. So that's what I have. And I know that Joe Taducci is on if there are specific questions that he can answer around water issues.
Okay. And again, I am aware of the City of Boulder's negotiation process and protocols from the incredible water supply overview study session that we had a few months ago. So I don't need to have that reiterated, but more so to just say, do we want to take a position and you answered my question around were there water conversations in those intergovernmental affairs. And anyway, there's that, but there's also other pieces. And again, I do want to commend that there is information in our current policy or proposed priorities around the water infrastructure, water affordability. I mean, I'm not suggesting it's not there, but there's just some big pieces that I just was curious if we wanted to take a broader position on. And also having a contingency plans, because I think that's the other piece. If it goes not our way, what's our plan? So so thank you very much. And Joe, you're welcome to hop on if there's anything you needed to clarify with that. Hey there, Joe.
Good evening. Thank you, Council Member Adams. I don't really have anything to add to that.
Okay.
We're for sure aware of the Colorado River situation and monitoring that closely. And as you and I have discussed in some of our individual conversations, working through the state, working through Northern Water, and really relying on them to kind of take the lead on these issues is where we're at.
Okay. And then while I have you, you're still on. Curious in the AI conversation, if there were any conversations around water consumption and tracking and reporting related to water consumption. I know that other cities and states have been challenged around this particular topic, although I appreciate some of the business community's concern around cumbersome policy. Again, I want to honor short-term gains over long-term sustainability.
Yeah, for sure, we're aware of that, and we know that around the country there are some massive data centers that use incredible amounts of water, and so we're monitoring that issue. One of the primary ways is through the Colorado Water Congress that we're a part of, and so we continue to talk about that with the Water Congress and just keep an eye on that issue as well.
Okay. Those were all my questions. Any other questions or concerns? I will say I am concerned about the length, but maybe it's more so just the structure. So that to Tina's earlier point of upfronting the parts and then having something a little bit more in the weeds. I also just would love to, just have some concerns around the connectivity, almost like a dashboard of like when things are moving and where they are. I also just wanted to lift up the other side of Ryan's pieces around being more specific. There were a couple of instances last year where we weren't specific and things moved. And I would have liked a touch point before we moved. And I had to ask in retrospect. And there's a line. And I just want to be cautious. I would rather be more prescriptive and then have something move forward so far down that we didn't have a chance to really have a chat before it already left the gate. So I just wanted to lift up that concern as well and try and find and strike the balance that's going to work for everybody. All right. Seeing no additional hands for questions or concerns about the principal's priorities or positions, I'll move us to our last piece, which is the proposed additional policy statement. And we are doing great on time with 45 minutes to go. So I was going to say, seeing no hands, meeting adjourned. Just kidding. Nicole.
Yeah, I sent mine out on hotline last night, anticipating that I may not have much of a voice. And I was just curious about if people had any questions around what I sent out, really just trying to, for places where we're entering new policy, like for the automated vehicles, ensuring that we are also considering some of the safety concerns that come with that in terms of privacy. And then Also just trying to think a little bit more broadly about the federally funded jobs that are in this community and the impact that has on our local economy. And so recognizing that they're not just connected to the federal labs, but also coming through federal grants. So thank you very much to Heather for helping me craft some language around that. But I was just, those were things I was interested in seeing if people would be open to including, as well as just a couple typo changes. And then Heather, you had also mentioned potentially adding something about safety net services to the regional policy, just to kind of align with, well, I think you didn't say this, you said it could be added there, but for me, it helps align with the focus on safety net services and programs throughout some of the other parts of the document, is to make sure we're noting that we're also looking for some regional alignment there. So I had one additional suggestion there on just a really minor wording change, which I can pull up, which was basically just to, in the regional priority section of the draft 2026 policy statement, we specify some words that increases access to, we could just add social safety net resources, including behavioral health services. And then it felt like it would just tie it all together with everything else that's in there. So I don't know what the best way is to do we do like a straw poll on the things that I suggested? Not sure how to move forward there, because I know Ryan, you had some as well. So Taisha, however you'd like to handle that.
Well, I will say, because I just have some concerns around trying to wordsmith everybody's thing in the next 45 minutes. I just don't think that that's realistic. So curious, Heather and Nuria, if there are processes or procedures that have been used in the past at this stage that will allow, like, maybe compiling, or, I know you sent the red line version. And so just really wanted to, and then also obviously Teresa, as it relates to, is it an out of 3? Is it an out of 5? Because we can't make policy changes at this stage at this meeting. So
yeah, that's a good question, and I will probably anticipate Teresa's question.
She's
on
right there.
Not nods and votes, that in a study session we would not have that, but we would have likely a straw poll to see if there is a majority of council that would like us to move forward on any particular suggestion. So that's generally what we would do at this juncture in terms of a study session. To your point, council member, there have been several of those placed in at hotline. So certainly we could address those and see it. I would have to take back and think about, if we do not know if there is collective desire to incorporate those changes tonight, what mechanism we would have to bring them back to you in time for a December 4th meeting. So
can I offer a process clarification?
Yep.
Nuria? So I think previously we get another bite at this apple in the early part of 2026, usually that allowing a new council to seat, and then those opportunities to arise. And so I think from the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, the thought was generally that we sort of had crafting, we had sort of remnants, we had some early trimming, some stuff that we saw forecasted coming in, and that's what this is here. And so for small little things, I'm sure we could probably make those little changes. But for the bigger substantive ones, I think it may be most appropriate, just given how we've historically done that those items come back to the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. And then we have the time and opportunity to work with Heather and the team to fold them in, to figure out how they're going, to figure out the viability and where they might come, and then have those ready for the next iteration of this when we do it in early 2026. Keeping in mind, there isn't going to be a ton of momentum, and really until we get into the later Q1 of next year, going into that legislative session. So it's to your point, Taisha, not to wordsmith now. So I just want to offer that as there's still remedy for this, to us work through it. That doesn't have to be done now, and we don't have to then feel crammed and pressed against the December deadline, knowing we can do this later. And that gives IGA a chance to help craft some of this with Heather and the team going into that next meeting. So I offer that out. That's how we've done them historically. And I don't know if that's still viable now.
Can I
feel-
policy off of that or? no?
Well, I went to,
Oh,
just,
I'm sorry. I appreciate all of this. So I very much like Matt that suggestion, and Teresa, just want to hear from you on your thoughts as it relates from a legal perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Adams. So it's certainly appropriate to take a straw poll with respect to particular direction. And so that would be helpful and appropriate tonight so that our intergovernmental affairs officer can begin to draft. Because otherwise, without that straw poll, we don't know what to draft and what not to draft.
Okay.
Alternatively,
as
Teresa, I'm
sorry.
sorry. Alternatively, Teresa, would it also be a straw poll on whether or not to do either some minor changes to move forward or to move some to a later time, right? All of those are straw
Sure.
pollable.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Okay. I guess where I'm going with this is my concern, and Ryan, this is to your thing. There was a lot of things in there, and I just have some concerns around going through each of those things in the next 40 minutes. So I'm not gonna, I just want to be realistic about that. So I'm just wondering maybe if we can ask in the straw poll something like, are we comfortable with that direction going back to the intergovernmental affairs for the refinement that that Matt had mentioned, and then we get another opportunity early December and January.
May I colloquy on that for just a second?
Yeah, well,
we still have one too.
colloquy.
I think other people are ahead of your colloquy, Mark.
Yeah, Mark.
Oh,
We're gonna
sorry,
go
Mark.
on the colloquy.
Nicole, and also people have their hands up from before, so it's also hard to figure out where we are
I'm a
on this
colloquy.
particular piece. You're a colloquy as well? All right, Nicole, Ryan, and Tara.
Yeah, I was just, my recollection, and certainly Nuria, Teresa, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we've typically used this study session as the opportunity to talk through potential changes to the policy statement before it has come up, like to talk through as a full council. And so, I mean, if we want to change, that's cool. I just didn't come in with the understanding of that. The larger ones that, well, larger points that I asked for really for me are more in getting this to be consistent and to a place where I feel like it would be easy to move forward in December.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I guess we'll just take it one to one then. Ryan, are you qualifying as well? Are you agreeing with?
Yeah, my hand was up for the item, but also I did want to colloquy. I would agree with Nicole. I mean, you just got a few items here. You could vote them up or down. It seems like this would be the time to give direction.
So can we get that?
Hold on.
Do you mind just pulling that email back up to the top
Can I
of
just say
my
one
email
thing
list,
before we
Ryan?
go further?
You can, Tara. Just one moment, and if you could just not talk over me, I appreciate it. Ryan, do you mind clicking that email back up to the top of our emails, if you just wouldn't mind, because I just want to have that fresh to do those parts. Nicole, I believe I have yours, and Tara.
I'm not comfortable with discussing it tonight because even though I read the hotlines, I didn't read them twice. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know that I was supposed to have studied them to make this kind of a decision. For some of the smaller ones that are no-brainers, I would call them, for instance, a safety net, or the whole you're enlarging of the labs to be everything related to labs, etc. That's different than the bigger policies, which I personally don't even want to take a straw poll tonight because I don't know. I haven't really thought it through.
I appreciate that. What we can do is we'll just take the bites that we feel are appropriate, that people feel comfortable on, and then if there are bigger items that we feel like we need, that we don't have enough information to make a decision on, we can move that back to the something else. Mark.
Just very quickly, Teresa, is it a serial meeting if we respond to some of this on hotline?
Yes, unfortunately, it is a serial meeting. And so that would be inappropriate.
Okay.
All right. All right, y'all. Well, let's go ahead and start with Nicole. Nicole, you are back on. Can we go to your recommendations?
Yep. So I would just add that, well, however you want me to go through it, I'm happy to.
I know, I'm just trying to figure out what is the easiest structure for that.
I'm happy to like say them, and then, you could kind of, if that helps.
Let's do it.
Okay.
I know, I almost wanted to do it like as a package, like you feel comfortable with the package of changes
Sure.
that Nicole recommends, because if the answer is yes, then it all
I can be
moves.
quick.
But if it doesn't, then we
However.
can go item by item. So
Whatever you'd like to do.
let's try that way. I would like to propose a straw poll for the approval of Nicole's recommendations to go to the next stage, which is going back to the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee for the refinement, and ready for the next stage of voting.
And
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Look at that. Well done, everybody.
May I ask just a clarifying question?
Sure.
Does that mean that this comes back in December when we approve it?
I would assume that we just said that it's going to be incorporated by the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee into the next version for voting. That was my understanding of what we just straw polled on.
Okay.
Mark, do you have a clarifying question, or is that an old hand? Or is that an old hand? Can't hear you, but it was an old hand. Matt.
Appreciate that. Just to clarify, Heather, do we have an IGA meeting scheduled between now and when the next scheduled vote is for this?
I don't believe that we do, so we would need to schedule another one.
Okay, so just for everyone's clarity, like we've got, a holiday week that we're gone, so we really only have 1 week left. So I just want to be practical with regards to when that might get scheduled. You've got 4 council members: Heather, Will, city attorney's office, city manager's office. These are generally harder to schedule. Not to say we can't, but I just want to be clear that this isn't going to be a rapid boom, boom, boom. We've got it taken care of. So hedging that, I just want to be mindful that we may not get to it, but we'll try. I don't want to speak for staff, but I just want to point out the scheduling complexity that might be there on that front, since we don't have that scheduled. And so it may roll over, but I just want to raise that.
And to your earlier point, Matt, going back to just the pace and flow for the session, I do believe we can get it in a great place before we have to really position on that.
Yep. And we normally do this in February following the retreat, right? So we have that wonderful session that does good job to really fine tune this as the session really picks up.
I agree. Point for clarification, is the vote scheduled on December 4th, or I just wanted to get a point of clarification on that.
If I may, Councilmember Adams, the vote could be moved, and the deadline for December 4th is today. And so any changes couldn't be incorporated before the deadline.
Wonderful. Thank you, Teresa.
Took the words out of my
for
mouth.
reminding us that we create the calendar and that we can move these items around. I feel much better about it. All right, Mayor Brockett.
Thanks, Taisha. So Teresa, to the point that you just made, we don't have to. We need enough time to be able to do this, right? For the IGA, December 4th is not a time frame by which we could do this. So, is it okay, based on the direction that council just gave, for us to send it to the IGA and then bring it back to council, but not by December 4th, but on a slower timeline than that? That probably involves, a couple months, maybe 10 weeks, something like that.
Yes, sir. That would be perfectly appropriate. And CAC could just take notice of that. Staff could update the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah. I would only, may I?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Yes, of course.
I would only say that one of the reasons we picked December 4th was so that we would have a policy statement to share in time for the legislative breakfast, which is December 2nd. Now we can just provide the one that we currently have and share that we do not have an update. So that is perfectly fine, but just know that.
So may I make a follow-up?
Mm-hmm.
So a follow-up suggestion, if I might. Perhaps we could, on December 4th, pass the staff presented revised policy statement and then pledge that the IGA will look at this as soon as is practically possible and come back to council with potential changes in the very early part of the year.
Perfect. Awesome.
Can I just get clarification? The staff pledged.
Staff proposed is what I thought I said.
Got it.
Mayor, is your hand up also for proposed additional items to the policy?
Nope, just that process thing.
All right. We're back to you, Ryan. You want to try and do the wholesale, or do you want to go item by item? Or do you want to prioritize your items?
Well, thanks, Taisha. Maybe I'll just say, summarize. So I sent a hotline to propose 9 items. So first of all, I love the statement as it is, but I would like to propose 9 additions. So 5 of those are in the climate realm, and those are items that are supported by current positions, but they specify substantive outcomes that I do not think are implied by what's in there. And they relate to topics that could come up. And I would ask for us to decide if we want to, have a position on these now in the, in the calm rather than later or guess at it. And then there were also 2 on housing, 1 on coal ash, and 1 on wildfire. And I did intend to put those in a template that could be just dropped into the statement. So anyway, that's what's there. And I'd be happy, Taisha, however you want to go at it, but I just thought I'd explain what's there.
Why don't we go section by section, because you kind of have sections. So do you want to can we start with the climate change and climate and community resilience section, which is the beneficial electrification, structural transition from natural gas to electrification, use of home electrification, underground thermal technologies, and plug-in residential solar devices. So that's section 1.
Okay. Oh, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna entertain a straw poll for folks that would be interested in having that section move forward in the next iteration.
Sorry, Taisha, could I?
Do you have a point of clarification?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I just wonder, with Nicole's suggestions, we were sending them to the IGA.
Sorry,
Seems
to
like
the IGA, yes.
Seems like for consistency's sake, we might also look at sending Ryan's suggestions to the IGA.
Yes, that's my apologies. That's what I was doing the straw poll for, to send the information to the IGA. So section 1, climate change and community resilience. Sorry,
can I ask
the other hands up for Mark or Tina. Are you asking a question or? Thank you. Mark, are you asking a question? Tara, are you asking a question? I'm trying to do the straw poll, so I'm just.
Yeah, but I want to.
So I guess I'm opening the questions for section number 1 for Ryan, potentially. I'm just trying to figure out I'm going to start with Mark. What's your hand up, honey?
I thought Aaron's suggestion was that we were sending the document with 9 suggestions from Ryan.
Oh, see, I thought, okay, no, okay. No, that's not what I was suggesting. I actually was suggesting going section by section in the big buckets, but if people feel comfortable just taking the whole thing and moving it over, I'm fine with doing it that way as well. So I amend my straw poll now, and then I'm going to go to Tina. Don't worry, I've facilitated for 30 years. I promise I will do this well. Tina.
And you're doing great. My question is, when we are voting to send it to IGA, does that mean that we anticipate that each of the points in Ryan's package will be reflected in a policy statement? Or will there be some vetting with staff or a possibility of not moving it forward? I just need to know what we're doing.
It was my understanding that it would go to IGA for consideration, and then that group would take, based on the additional research feedback, and present us with a iteration that we can vote on at the next availability. That was my understanding.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Tara.
Yeah, I have a question. Ryan's first section sounded very detail oriented to me versus the broader request that we had from Heather. So do I bring that up here or do I just tell the folks at the IGA?
Or you
Whatever
can
you
just
guys are
not
called.
vote on the straw poll.
What's that?
You could vote no on the straw poll
Well,
as another mechanism of saying, because as we discussed, right, and as Heather said, there are advantages to being specific in instances, and there are advantages of being more broad. And we, as a council, need to decide when we want to be specific and when we want to be more broad. So,
I actually trust the is that the IGA? Is that the acronym?
the intergovernmental affairs, yes.
Yes, okay. I trust the IGA, but so I'm fine with it. I was just wondering if that was too specific, maybe from Heather's point of view, before we take these very many sections and pass them along, or should I let Heather talk to the IGA about it? I think that's what I'm
Heather?
saying. Heather?
Thank you. And Ryan and I talked a little bit about this. And as I mentioned, you know, there's no specific formula to follow. I think there's a balance in finding, in being broad enough to be flexible, but not too broad so that we don't have direction. So I'm happy to explore drafting these with the IGA committee. But I don't have a specific to say, yes, this is too specific or this is not too specific. It's just general advice.
And Heather, if I'm not mistaken, at the IGA, when you have a particular topic, you bring staff with you to discuss there. So there will be some discussion of the topic with the IGA committee in play.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nuria, for pointing that out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Taisha, can I just say before we go forward on my behalf here, or whatever, the behalf of having presented these, I also trust the IGA. What is written here are specific outcomes that this council might wish to say we want them to happen or not. So if the council does not wish to stand for these items, that's the council's will. But I would just ask you to consider that these are not specified and they're not implied by what is in the current statement. So happy to go forward however you want from here.
Mark.
Another question for Teresa. May I also infer that any communication on, for instance, these 9 items with the IGA is a serial meeting?
Yes, sir. You may infer that.
Okay, then let me ask the following question. Other than doing each one tonight in great detail, which I don't think is the will of council, how does one communicate comments on a document of this type, which is a very substantive document? And I would say that a number of these I think to be well taken, and a couple I think are more problematic. How does one communicate?
Sure. I believe there are 2 options here. You could each individually communicate with Councilmember Shuhart about these, and or you could each communicate individually with Heather about these. And Heather could gather that information and receive that input.
Thank you, Mark. Great question. Thank you. Nuria, great process. Heather, do you feel comfortable with that? And Ryan?
Yes.
Wonderful.
I feel comfortable on my end.
Wonderful. Anything else, Mark?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Nicole.
Oh yeah, I just had one more question going back to one of my additions, but I don't know if this is quite the right time.
No, can we get through this first before we, and actually I want to open up to others who haven't done a hotline to share any additionals there. Okay, so let's go back to straw poll to move the 9 policy considerations to the IGA for consideration. If you have additional feedback, you can direct them directly to Ryan or Heather. Can I get a show of hands if you'd like to advance? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And 8, it advances. Thank you so much, Ryan. I especially love the solar piece because solar development is under, and we need to be more explicit around that. Also the coal ash. All right, Nicole, before we come back to yours, which I appreciate, I just want to open up to folks who have not made any proposed additions to the policy statement yet, before we go into logistical refinements. I have some. Okay, so I've already mentioned the water piece, and one, just really grateful to see that there. But I do think that we need to get specific about water consumption for data centers. And I know, Joe, you indicated elsewhere, but we know it's a fight right now in Aurora on this issue. So I just want to, I would love to see a little bit more there. I've already spoken to you, Heather, around the agricultural component and the food systems. I know that the Food Security Network is working on a food security plan, or a food plan for Boulder County. I believe they'll have that done January 2026. So it's wonderful to know that we have a little bit more flexibility in time to finalize these, because again, I would love to get some more community and expert feedback on the agricultural front. I also, as a former member of the Rocky Flout Stewardship Council, would be remiss if I didn't lift up the need to address the polluter and polluter accountability, particularly around the orphan wells, and just knowing that in fiscal year 24, we spent about, the state of Boulder, the state of Colorado spent about 15 million on decommissioning the old oil fields and equipment and plugs and all of those things. And just would love to continue to push on the polluter piece. Again, I know polluter accountability is on there, but I just wanted to get really specific around that. And the irony of the coal ash piece is not lost on me. And then lastly, for the food and supply component, which I just loved seeing in there. It was great to see it strengthen the supply chain, but I actually would offer a reduction of food miles, and trying to make sure that more of our food stays in state, and are actually feeding our communities and feeding our families. I also didn't see anything around mobile food practices and just zoning. I know that the Flatiron Farmers Coalition Policy Committee, in some of the conversations that we've had, mentioned some of the barriers that they've had around zoning, whether that be for composting or housing on farms, or or near farms, or and there's a transit component as well. So I'll probably submit a hotline, but unfortunately the plan isn't going to be available until January. So I can certainly lift up the pieces that we've already discussed, but I did want to just lift up that group is and has been working over the last 2 years on that work, and have done such an incredible cross section of our community. So although I love all of the enthusiasm around the farmers market, there's a significant work that needs to be done on our food systems, based on what we just saw with the SNAP kerfuffle. So I just wanted to lift that up as well. Trying to think if there's anything else. And then I just wanted to echo Nicole's, and this is a nice segue back, Nicole's concerns around security and cybersecurity, and I just really have some concerns around data security and cybersecurity at the yes, and the cameras and all the different things that we are doing and tracking, and just would really love to get a little bit more there. Nicole, is there wanted to follow up with you on whatever it is that you wanted to share before.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, the one thing with the automated vehicles language, because we've never talked about that before as a council, it's the first time that that's coming to us as a policy. And I was wondering if we could just spend a couple minutes talking about that piece of it, because I would love to see this come back with it, since it's not like a brand new thing. it is a something that to me feels like a really big omission in what has been put together for this new area of the policy that's not existed before. Because I think the whole automated vehicle thing, it's never shown up before. So I was just wondering if we could talk about that and see if there would be support for putting that part in, not to do a big go through line by line on everything else, but because that one is brand new and we haven't ever talked about it before out as a council. I know IGA has, but we haven't. So I would love to just spend a couple minutes chatting about that one and see if there would be support in bringing that back for just straw poll to see if it's worth staff bringing that back on the 4th.
I'm sorry, I thought we just did your whole package. Wasn't that in it?
But I thought that was to send it to IGA to review
Right.
and discuss.
I'm happy to have a discussion right now. We still have 15 minutes, but I thought that we can have a discussion now. It's still going to go back to RGA and then come back to us. Did you want to?
This is what I'm asking, is if we could have that piece of the
misunderstanding.
discussion, because it's a brand new policy position that's never been in our document before, versus other things that I think are like tweaks or expansions of other statements that are in there.
Sure.
So I can happy to make a pitch for it just in case other people didn't get a chance to read before. But basically because we're talking about how automated vehicles, how there may be some state legislation to regulate them. A lot of it is around how it kind of integrates into our transportation system. But one of the big concerns that I have, because of how these are being used in other authoritarian states, is that they can easily turn into surveillance mechanisms, right? And you're getting audio, visual, biometric recording, not just of what's inside the vehicle, but also what's outside of the vehicle, which can very quickly be weaponized. And so it's just as that legislation is moving forward, because I understand that it will be discussed in this next session, that there's also a component that is encouraging us to advocate for some very basic digital safety mechanisms within that, like the data should be de-identified, aggregated. Any data collected shouldn't be shared with third parties or the federal government unless there's a valid court order or a warrant. And then the other one was that the data collected by these automated vehicles need to comply with all existing Colorado laws around data privacy and enforcement, and that data collection analysis shouldn't be used in a manner that results in disproportionate surveillance. Those were the main ones. It's my very quick pitch.
Heather, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to clarify, I have not seen language related to a potential bill this session, just based on kind of the chatter. There was a article in the Denver Post recently. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw statewide legislation, but I just wanted to make it clear that I am not 100% certain that there will be legislation this session.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Does anybody have anything to add? Tara?
I think this is a big subject that I would need more information, even though I appreciated, Nicole, your paragraph about it. So I don't feel comfortable with something so new without really thinking it through, hearing the pros and cons. To me, it's too big to just say, sure, let's do it. So that's just my 2 cents of it. I'm not saying I'm against it or for it. I just don't have enough information.
Then may I do a quick colloquy response to that? Then I wonder if we might be able to just hold this one until we can, IGA can have a bigger conversation about it and bring back something that also incorporates this piece of it.
I'm sorry, Teresa, point of clarification. I really thought that we had already put all this to IGA. I'm trying to understand.
I believe so.
And then similarly to Ryan's, if we have questions, we can go to Nicole or to Heather.
Correct.
So this is more of just an open discussion right now?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Tara, do you have anything else before I go to Ryan on this? All right, Ryan.
Thanks. I just Nicole made me think of something. It was Heather's reply about that we don't know if there's maybe not likely that there's active legislation happening on this. I guess my question is to Nicole, does that matter? Because I think what you're saying is this is something that we need a position on, irrespective of what, whether there's an active bill. But I don't. Could you just speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's that we're talking about the automated, like this is new, right? This is a new section that's coming in. To me, this is a big omission in that component. So, does it matter if there's not, legislation? Not really, but also this does feel to me like it's a critical missing component of how we think about policy positions around automated vehicles.
Thanks.
Mayor.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nicole. And I really appreciate you flagging this particular issue. And I think we had direction from council to go to the IGA on this. And I think what we can do is commit to scheduling an IGA committee meeting in the fairly near future, so that this does not lag a really long time. And so certainly it sounds like there's not going to be a bill introduced like in week one. So I think we do have some time to get ahead of this before it becomes a pressing issue. If that, I think we can work with that.
Again, I think that this is one of the reasons I've been bringing up the issues around AI and data. And actually made me think about, from the AI policy, ownership and authorship concerns. I know I'm hearing from our arts community around ownership and authorship, copyright violations, and also from others. So I would love to explore the intersect, as the AI policy component continues to evolve, just the ownership and authorship, intellectual property components, which I also are a big gap in that particular policy. Any other comments or questions about the data collection safeguards and consumer privacy? All right. Any other proposed additions to the policy statement? All right, seeing none. Anything else that we need to do for the good of the order, Nuria or Teresa?
You were all good to close.
All
I
right.
would just compliment Heather on her first presentation to council.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And thank you all for this robust conversation. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you to my fellow council members, staff, to all of the public and the listeners. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Taisha.